Costs. Janus presents The Valley of Fear Part 2. You can also listen Part 1, link in the description. So let's begin the Scowrer, Chapter 1. The man it was the 4th of Costs. February in the year 1875, it had been a severe winter, and the snow lay deep in the gorges of the Gilmerton Mountains. The steam plows had, however, kept a railroad open, and the evening train, Costs, which connects the long line of coal mining and iron working settlements, was slowly groaning its way up the steep gradients which lead from Stagville on the plain to Vermissa, the central township which lies at the head of Costs, Vermissa Valley. From this point, the track sweeps downward to Barton's Crossing Helm Dale and a purely agricultural county of Merton. It was a single-track railroad, but at every siding, and they were numerous long lines. Costs of trucks piled with coal and iron ore told of the hidden wealth which had brought a rude population and a bustling life to this most desolate corner of the United States of America, for desolate it Costs was. Little could the first pioneer who had traversed it have ever imagined that the first prairies and the most lush water pastures were valueless compared to this gloomy land of black crag and cost-tangled forest above the dark and often scarcely penetrable woods upon their flanks. The high bare crowns of the mountains, white snow and jagged rock towered upon each flank, leaving a long, winding, tortuous valley in the center of Costs. The little train was slowly crawling. The oil lamps had just been lit in the leading passenger car, a long, bare carriage in which some 20 or 30 people were seated. The greater number of these were workmen, Costs returning from their day's toil in the lower part of the valley, at least a dozen by their grimed faces, and the safety lanterns which they carried proclaimed themselves. These sat smoking in a group and conversed in low, Costs voices, glancing occasionally at two men on the opposite side of the car, whose uniforms and badges showed them to be policemen, several women of the laboring class, and one or two travelers who might, Costs, have been small local storekeepers, made up the rest of the company, with the exception of one young man in a corner by himself. It is with this man that we are concerned. Take a good look at him, Costs, for he is worth it. He is a fresh-complexioned, middle-sized young man, not far, one would guess, from his 30th year. He has large, shrewd, humorous grey eyes, which twinkle inquiringly from time to time, as he Costs looks round through his spectacles at the people about him. It is easy to see that he is of a sociable land, possibly simple disposition, anxious to be friendly to all men. Anyone could pick Costs him at once as gregarious in his habits and communicative in his nature, with a quick wit and a ready smile, and yet the man who studied him more closely might discern a certain firmness of jaw and Costs' grim tightness about the lips, which would warn him that there were depths beyond, and that this pleasant, brown-haired young Irishman might conceivably leave his mark for good or evil upon any society to which he was. Costs introduced, having made one or two tentative remarks to the nearest miner, and receiving only short, gruff replies, the traveller resigned himself to uncongenial silence, staring moodily out of the window at the fading landscape. It, Costs, was not a cheering prospect through the growing gloom. There post the red glow of the furnaces on the sides of the hills. Great heaps of slag and dumps of cinders loomed up on each side, with the high Costs shafts of the collieries towering above them. Huddled groups of mean wooden houses, the windows of which were beginning to outline themselves in light, were scattered here and there along the line, and the frequent halting places, Costs, were crowded with their swarthy inhabitants. The iron and coal valleys of the Vermissa district were no resorts for the leisured or the cultured. Everywhere there were stern signs of the crudest battle of life. The rude work too, Costs be done, and the rude strong workers who did it. The young traveller gazed out into this dismal country with the face of mingled repulsion and interest, which showed that the scene was new to him. At Costs' intervals, he drew from his pocket a bulky letter to which he referred, and on the margins of which he scribbled some notes. Once, from the back of his waist, he produced something which one would Costs hardly have expected to find in the possession of so mild-mannered a man. It was a navy revolver of the largest size. As he turned it slant-wise to the light, the glint upon the rims of the copper Costs shells within the drum showed that it was fully loaded. He quickly restored it to his secret pocket, but not before it had been observed by a working man who had seated himself upon the adjoining Costs bench. "Hello, mate," said he. "You same heeled and ready?" The young man smiled with an air of embarrassment. Yes, said he, we need them sometimes in the place I come from, and where may that be I'm last from? Costs. Chicago a stranger in these parts, yes you may find you needed here, said the workman. Ah, is that so? The young man seemed interested. Have you heard nothing of doings hereabouts, nothing out of the way? Why I, Costs, thought the country was full of it. You'll hear quick enough. What made you come here? I heard there was always work for a willing man. Are you a member of the union? Sure, then you'll get your job. I, Costs, guess? Have you any friends? Not yet, but I have. The means of making them. How's that then? I'm one of the eminent order of freemen. There's no town without a lodge. Costs. And where there is a large. I'll find my friends. The remark had a singular effect upon his companion. He glanced round suspiciously at the others in the car. The miners were still whispering among Costs themselves. The two police officers were dozing. He came across, seated himself close to the young traveller, and held out his hand. Put it there, he said. A hand grip passed between the two. I see you. Costs speed the truth, said the workman. But it's well to make certain. He raised his right hand to his right eyebrow. The traveller at once raised his left hand to his left eyebrow. Dark nights are Costs. Unpleasant, said the workman. Yes, for strangers to travel, the other answered. Less good enough. I'm Brother Scanlon, Lodge 341, Vermissa Valley. Glad to see you in these parts. Thank you. I'm Brother John McMurdo, Large 29, Chicago Bodymaster. Costs. J.H. Scott. But I'm in luck to meet a brother so early. Well, there are plenty of us about. You won't find the order more flourishing anywhere in the States than right here in Vermissa Valley, but Costs? We could do with some lads like you. I can't understand a spry man of the Union finding no work to do in Chicago. I found plenty of work to do, said McMurdo. Then why did you leave? Costs. McMurdo nodded towards the policeman and smiled. I guess those chaps would be glad to know, he said. Scanlon groaned sympathetically. In trouble, he asked, in a whisper. Deep penitentiary job and arrest, not a Costs killing. It's early days to talk such things, said McMurdo, with the air of a man who had been surprised into saying more than he intended. I've my own good reasons for leaving Chicago, and let Costs that be enough for you. Who were you that you should take it on yourself to ask such things? His grey eyes gleamed with sudden and dangerous anger from behind his glasses. All right, mate, it's no offence. Costs meant the boys will take none the worse of you, whatever you may have done. Where are you bound for? Now for me, sir. There's the third halt down the line. Where are you staying? Costs. McMurdo took out an envelope and held it close to the murky oil lamp. Here is the address. Jacob Shafter, Sheridan Street. It's a boarding house that was recommended by a man I knew in Chicago. Costs, well, I don't know it, but Vermissa is out of my beat. I live a Hobson's Patch, and that's here where we are drawing up. But say there's one bit of advice I'll give. Costs you before we part. If you're in trouble in Vermissa, go straight to the Union House and see Boss McGinty. He's the body master of the Missile Lodge, and nothing can happen in these parts. Unless Blackjack McGinty wants it. Costs. So long. Mate, maybe we'll meet in Lodge one of these evenings. Burr my words, if you're in trouble. Go to Boss. McGinty Scanlon descended, and McMurdo was left, once again to his thoughts. Night had now Costs fallen, and the flames of the frequent furnaces were roaring and leaping in the darkness. Against their lurid background, dark figures were bending and straining, twisting and turning with the motion of winter of windlass to the rhythm of an Costs' eternal clank and roar. I guess he'll must look something like that, said a voice. McMurdo turned and saw that one of the policemen had shifted in his seat and was staring out into the fiery waste. For that matter, Costs, said the other policeman. I allow that hell must be something like that. If there are worse devils down yonder than some we could name, it's more than I'd expect. I guess you were new to this part. Costs, young man. Well, what if I am? McMurdo answered, in a surly voice. Just this, mister, that I should advise you to be careful in choosing your friends. I don't think I'd begin with Mike Scanlon or his Costs gang. If I were you. What the hell is it to you who are my friends? Roared McMurdo in a voice which brought every head in the carriage round to witness the altercation. Did I ask for your advice? Costs, or did you think me? Such a sucker that I couldn't move without it. You speak when you're spoken to, and by the Lord you'd have to wait a long time if it was me. Cost thrust out his face and grinned at the patrolman like a snarling dog. The two policemen, heavy, good-natured men, were taken aback by the extraordinary vehemence with which their friendly advances had been rejected. No offense. Cost, stranger, said one. It was a warning for your own good. He's saying that you are for your own, showing new to the place. I'm new to the place, but I'm not new to you and your costs. Kind, cried McMurdo in cold fury. I guess you're the same in all places, shoving your advice in where nobody asked for it. Maybe we'll see more of you before very long, said one of the patrolmen with a Costs grin. You're a real hand-picked one if I'm a judge. I was thinking the same, remarked the other. I guess we may meet again. I'm not afraid of you, and don't you think it? Cried McMurdo. My name's Costs. Jack McMurdo. See if you want me. You'll find me at Jacob Shaft is on Sheridan Street, Vermissa, so I'm not hiding from you. Am I day or night? I dare to look the Costs like of you in the face, don't make any mistake about that. There was a murmur of sympathy and admiration from the miners at the dauntless demeanor of the newcomer, while the two policemen shrugged their Costs' shoulders and renewed a conversation between themselves. A few minutes later, the train ran into the ill-lit station, and there was a general clearing, for Vermissa was by far the largest town on the line. Costs. McMurdo picked up his leather gripsack and was about to start off into the darkness when one of the miners accosted him by "Gar mate, you know how to speak to." Costs the cops, he said in a voice of awe. It was grand to hear you let me carry a grip and show you the road I'm passing Shafter on the way to my own shack there. Costs was a chorus of friendly good nights from the other miners as they passed from the platform. Before ever he had set foot in it, McMurdo the Turbulent had become a character in Vermissa. The Costs country had been a place of terror, but the town was in its way even more depressing. Down that long valley there was at least a certain gloomy grandeur in the huge fires and the clouds of Costs' drifting smoke, while the strength and industry of man found fitting monuments in the hills which he had spilled by the side of his monstrous excavations. But the town showed a dead level of mean. Costs' ugliness and squalor. The broad street was churned up by the traffic into a horrible rutted paste of muddy snow. The sidewalks were narrow and uneven. The numerous gas lamps served only to show Costs more clearly. A long line of wooden houses, each with its veranda facing the street, unkempt and dirty. As they approached the center of the town, the scene was brightened by a row of Costs' well-lit stores, and even more by a cluster of saloons and gaming houses, in which the miners spent their hard-earned but generous wages. That's the Union House, said the guide, pointing to one saloon which rose almost to the dignity. Costs of being a hotel. Jock McGinty is the base there. What sort of a man is he? McMurdo asked. What, have you never heard of the boss? How could I have heard of him when you, Costs, know that I'm a stranger in these parts? Well, I thought his name was known clear across the country. It's been in the papers often enough. What? For well, the miner lowered his voice over the affairs. Costs, what affairs, good lord? Mister, you are queer, if I must say it without defense. There's only one set of affairs that you'll hear of in these parts, and that's the affairs of the Scowrers. Why, I seem to, Costs, have read of the Scowrers in Chicago, a gang of murderers. Heard they not? Hush on your life, cried the miner, standing still in alarm and gazing in amazement at his companion man. You won't live long in Costs these parts. If you speak in the open street like that, many a man has had a life beaten out of him for less. Well, I know nothing about them. It's only what? Costs. I've read, and I'm not saying that you have not read the fruit. The man looked nervously round him as he spoke, peering into the shadows, as if he feared to see some lurking. Costs' danger of killing his murder. Then God knows there is murder, Anne, to spare. But don't you dare to breathe the name of Jack McGinty in connection with its stranger, for every whisper goes back to him and Costs. She is not one that is likely to let it pass. Now, that's the house you're after, that one stand him back from the street. You'll find old Jacob Shafter that runs it. His honest Amana's lives in this. Costs. Township. I thank you, said McMurdo, and shaking hands with his new acquaintance, he plodded grips a keen hand up the path which led to the dwelling house, at the door of which he gave a resounding knock. Costs. It was opened at once by someone very different from what he had expected. It was a woman, young and singularly beautiful she was, of the German type, blonde and fair-haired with the piquant, Cost's contrast of a pair of beautiful dark eyes with which she surveyed the stranger with surprise, and a pleasing embarrassment which brought a wave of colour over her pale face, framed in the bright light of the open, Cost's doorway. It seemed to McMurdo that he had never seen a more beautiful picture, the more attractive for its contrast with disordered and gloomy surroundings. A lovely violet growing upon one of those. Cost's black slag, heaps of the mines would not have seemed more surprising. So entranced was he that he stood staring without a word, and it was she who broke the silence. "I thought it was father," said she, Cost's, with a pleasing little touch of a German accent. "Did you come to see him? He is downtown. I expect him back every minute." McMurdo continued to gaze at her in open admiration until her eyes dropped in. Cost's confusion before this masterful visitor. "No, miss," he said. "At last I'm in no hurry to see him, but your house was recommended to me for board. I thought it might suit me, and now I know it will you." "Costs were quick to make up your mind," said she, with a smile anyone but a blind man could do as much. The other answered. She laughed at the compliment. "Come right in, sir," she said. "I'm Mr. Pettyshafter, Mr. Costshaft, his daughter. My mother is dead, and I run the house. You can sit down by the stove in the front room until father comes along." "Ah, he is so you can fix things." Costs with him right away. A heavy elderly man came plodding up the path. In a few words, McMurdo explained his business. A man of the name of Murphy had given him the Cost's address in Chicago. He in turn had had it from someone else. Old Shafter was quite ready. The stranger made no bones about terms, agreed at once to every condition, and was apparently fairly flush of money for $7. Costs 00 a week paid in advance. He was to have board and lodging, so it was that McMurdo, the self-confessed fugitive from justice, took up his abode under the roof of the shaft as the first step which was to Costs lead to so long and dark a train of events ending in a far distant land. Chapter 2. The Bodymaster. McMurdo was a man who made his mark quickly wherever he was. Costs. The folk around soon knew it. Within a week, he had become infinitely the most important person at Shafters. There were 10 or a dozen boarders there, but they were honest foremen or commonplace. Costs. Clerks from the stores of a very different caliber from the young Irishman of an evening. When they gathered together, his joke was always the radiest, his conversation the brightest, and his song the best. He was a Costs-born boon companion with a magnetism which drew good humour from all around him, and yet he showed again and again, as he had shown in the railway carriage, a capacity for sudden fierce anger, which Costs compelled the respect, and even the fear of those who met him for the law too, and all who were connected with it. He exhibited a bitter contempt, which delighted some, and alarmed others of his Costs' fellow boarders from the first. He made it evident by his open admiration that the daughter of the house had won his heart from the instant he had set eyes upon her beauty and her grace. He was no Costs' backward suitor. On the second day he told her that he loved her, and from then onward he repeated the same story with an absolute disregard of what she might say to discourage him someone else. He, Costs, would cry, "Well, the worse luck for someone else. Let him look out for himself. Am I to lose my life's chance and all my heart's desires for someone else? You can keep on saying no, Etty. The day will, Costs, come when you will say yes, and I'm young enough to wait." He was a dangerous suitor with his glib Irish tongue and his pretty coaxing ways. There was about him also that glamour of experience and of Costs' mystery which attracts a woman's interest, and finally her love. He could talk of the sweet valleys of County Monaghan, from which she came, of the lovely distant island, the low hills and green meadows, of which seemed the more Costs beautiful when imagination viewed them from this place of grime and snow. Then he was versed in the life of the cities of the north of Detroit and the lumber camps of Michigan, and finally of Chicago. Costs, where he had worked in a planing mill, and afterwards came the hint of romance, feeling that strange things had happened to him in that great city, so strange and so intimate dude they might not be spoken of. Costs. She spoke wistfully of a sudden leaving, a breaking of old ties, a flight into a strange world ending in this dreary valley, and Etty listened, her dark eyes gleaming with pity and with sympathy. Costs, those two qualities which may turn so rapidly and so naturally to love. McMurdo had obtained a temporary job as bookkeeper, for he was a well-educated man. This kept him out most of the day. Costs. And he had not found occasion yet to report himself to the head of the lodge of the Eminent Order of Freemen. He was reminded of his omission, however, by a visit one evening from Mike Scanlon, the Costs fellow member whom he had met in the train. Scanlon, the small, sharp-faced, nervous, black-eyed man, seemed glad to see him once more. After a glass or two of whiskey, he broached the subject of his Costs visit. "Say, McMurdo," said he, "I remembered your address, so I made bold to call. I'm surprised that you've not reported to the Bodymaster. Why haven't you seen Boss McGinty yet?" "Well, I had to find a Costs job." "I have been busy. You must find time for him. If you have known for anything else, good Lord, man, you're a fool not to have been down to the Ewan house and registered your name, the Costs. First morning after you came here, if you run against him, well, you mustn't." That's all. McMurdo showed mild surprise. "I've been a member of the lodge for over 2 years, Scanlon, but I never heard that duties, Costs were so pressing as all that. Maybe not in Chicago. Well, it's the same society. Here is it." Scanlon looked at him long and fixedly. There was something sinister in his eyes, isn't it? "Costs. You'll tell me that in a month's time I hear you had a talk with the patrolman after I left the train. How did you know that?" "Oh, it got about. Things do get about. Costs for goods, hand for bad in this district." "Well, yes, I told to hounds what I thought at them. By the Lord, you'll be a man after McGinty's heart." "What does he hate the police too?" Scanlon burst out. Costs laughing. "You go and see him, my lad," said he, as he took his leave. "It's not the police, but you, that he'll hate, if you don't now take a friend's advice and go at Costs." Once it chanced that on the same evening McMurdo had another more pressing interview, which urged him in the same direction. It may have been that his attentions to Eddie had been more evident, and before all that they had. Costs gradually obtrude themselves into the slow mind of his good German host, but whatever the cause, the boarding-house keeper beckoned the young man into his private room, and started on the subject without any circumlocution, it seems to. "Costs me, mister," said he, "that you are getting set on my Etty, and that's so, or am I wrong?" "Yes, that is so," the young man answered. "Well, I want to tell you right, Costs, now that it ain't no manner of use there. Someone slipped in afore you. She told me so well, you can lay that she told you the truth. But did she tell you who it, Costs, was?" "No. I asked her what she wouldn't tell. I dare say not the little baggage. Perhaps she did not wish to frighten you." Of a frightened McMurdo was on fire in a moment. Costs. "Yes, my friend, you need not be ashamed to be frightened of him. It is Teddy Baldwin, and who the devil is? He is a boss of Scowrers. Scowrers, I've heard them before. Costs, it's Scowrer is here, and Scowrer is there, and always in a whisper what you're afraid of who discovers." The boarding-house keeper instinctively sank his voice, as everyone did, who talked about that terrible society. "The scholars, Costs," said he, "are the Eminent Order of Freemen." The young man stared. "Why, I am a member of that order myself." I would never have had you in my house if I had known." "Costs it not. If you were to pay me $100 a week, what's wrong with the order? It's for charity and good fellowship. The rules say so, maybe in some places, not here." "Costs. What is it here? It's a murder society. That's what it is." McMurdo laughed incredulously. "How can you prove that?" he asked. "Prove it? Are there not 50 murders to prove it? What about Millman, Costs, and Vaughan Short, and the Nicholson family, and old Mr. Hewerman, little Billy James, and the others? Prove it. Is there a man or woman in this valley, but does not know it?" "See, here," said McMurdo earnestly. "Costs, I want you to take back what you've said, or else make it good. One or the other you must do before I quit this room. Put yourself in my place here. Am I a Cost stranger in the town? I belong to a society that I know only as an innocent one. You'll find it through the length and breadth of the states, but always as an innocent one, now when I'm counting. Costs, upon joining it here, you tell me that it is the same as a murder society called the Scowrers. I guess you owe me either an apology or else an explanation, Mr. Shafter. I can but tell you what the Costs. Whole world knows, Mr. The bosses of the van are the bosses of the other. If you offend the one, it is the other vaudevilles strike you. We have proved it too often. That's just gossip." "I want proof," said Costs McMurdo. "If you live here long enough, you will get your proof. But I forget that you are yourself one of them. You will soon be as bad as the rest, but you will." "Costs, find other lodgings. Mister, I cannot have you here. Is it not bad enough that one of these people come quoting my 80, and that I dare not turn him down, but that I, Costs, should have another for my boarder? He is indeed. You shall not sleep here after tonight. McMurdo found himself under sentence of banishment, both from his comfortable quarters and from the girl, Costs, whom he loved. He found her alone in the sitting room that same evening, and he poured his troubles into her ear. "Sure your father is, after giving me notice," he said, "but indeed, Etty, though it's only a Costs week that I've known you, you are the very breath of life to me. I can't live without you." "Oh, hush, Mr. McMurdo, don't speak so," said the girl. "I have told you, Costs, have I not, that you are too late? There is another, and if I have not promised to marry him at once, at least I can promise no one else. Suppose I had been first, Eddie, would I? Costs have had a chance." The girl sank her face into her hands. "I wish to heaven that you had been the first," she sobbed. McMurdo was down on his knees before her in an instant. "For God's sake, Eddie, let Costs it stand at that," he cried. "Well, you ruin your life in my own, for the sake of this promise. Follow your heart. Acushla, there's a safer guide than any promise before you." Costs knew what it was that you were saying. He had seized at his white hand between his own strong brown ones. "Say that you will be mine, and we will face it out together." Costs, not here. Yes, here. No, no. Jack, his arms were around her. Now, it could not be here. "Could you take me away?" A struggle passed for a moment over McMurdo's face, but it ended by setting like granite. "No, Costs here," he said. "I'll hold you against the world, and he right here where we are. Why should we not leave together? No, Eddie, I can't leave here, but why I'd never hold my head up again. Costs, if I felt that I had been driven out, besides what is there to be afraid of? Are we not free folks in a free country? If you love me, and I you, who will dare? Costs to come between. You don't know Jack, you've been here too short a time. You don't know this Baldwin, you don't know McGinty, and his Scour is no, I don't know them, and I don't fear them, and I don't." "Costs, believe in them," said McMurdo. "I've lived among rough men, my darling, and instead of fearing them it has always ended, that they have feared me always. Eddie, it's not on the face of it if these men are Costs. Your father says have done crime after crime in the valley, and if everyone knows them by name, how comes it that none are brought to justice? You answer me that, Eddie, because no witness dares, Costs, to appear against them. He would not live a month if he did also, because they have always their own men to swear that the accused one was far from the scene of Costs the crime. But surely, Jack, you must have read all this. I had understood that every paper in the United States was writing about it. Well, I have read something. It is true, but I thought it was a story. Costs, maybe these men have some reason in what they do. Maybe they are wronged, have no other way to help themselves. Oh, Jack, don't let me hear you speak. So that is how he speaks, the other one. Costs Baldwin. He speaks like that, does he? That is why I loathe him so well, Jack. Now I can tell you the truth. I loathe him with all my heart, but I fear him also. I fear Costs him for myself, but above all I fear him for father. I know that some great sorrow would come upon us if I dared to say what I really felt. That is why I have. Costs put him off, with half promises. It was in real truth our only hope. But if you would fly with me, Jack, we could take father with us, and live forever, far from the power of these Costs wicked men again. There was the struggle on McMurdo's face, and again it set like granite. "No harm shall come to you, Etty, nor to your father, either as to wicked men, Costs. I expect you may find that I am as bad as the worst of them before we're through." "No, no, Jack, I would trust you anywhere," McMurdo laughed bitterly. "Good Lord, how little you know of me, your innocent soul." Costs, my darling, could not even guess what is passing in mind. But hello, who's the visitor? The door had opened suddenly, and a young fellow came swaggering in, with the air of one who is the master he was. Costs. A handsome, dashing young man of about the same age, and build as McMurdo himself under his broad-brimmed black felt hat, which he had not troubled to remove. A handsome face with fierce, domineering eyes, and a curved hawk bill. Costs of a nose looked savagely at the pair who sat by the stove. Etty had jumped to her feet, full of confusion and alarm. "I'm glad to see you, Mr. Baldwin," said she. "You're earlier then." Costs had thought come and sit down. Baldwin stood with his hands on his hips, looking at McMurdo. "Who is this?" he asked curtly. "It's a friend of mine, Mr. Baldwin, a new boarder here, Mr. McMurdo. May I, Costs, introduce you to Mr. Baldwin?" The young man nodded in surly fashion to each other. "Maybe Miss Eddie has told you how it is with us," said Baldwin. "I didn't understand that there was any relation. Costs between you, didn't you? Well, you can understand it now. You can take it from me that this young lady is mine, and you'll find it a very fine evening for a Costs walk." "Thank you. I'm in no humor for a walk, aren't you?" The man's savage eyes were blazing with anger. "Maybe you're in a humor for a fight, Mr. Border, that I am, Costs," cried McMurdo, springing to his feet. "You never said a more welcome word, for God's sake, Jack." "Oh, for God's sake," cried poor distracted Etty. "Oh, Jack, Jack, he will hurt you. Oh, it's Jack." "Is it?" "Costs," said Baldwin with an oath. "You've come to that already, have you? Oh, Ted, be reasonable, be kind for my sake, Ted, if ever you loved me. Be big-hearted and forgiving, Costs, think, Eddie, that if you were to leave us alone, we could get this thing settled," said McMurdo quietly. "Or maybe, Mr. Baldwin, you will take a turn down the street with me. That's a fine evening, and there's some Costs open ground beyond the next block. I'll get even with you without needing to dirty my hands," said his enemy. "You'll wish you had never set foot in this house before. I'm through with you no time like the present." "Costs," cried McMurdo. "I'll choose my own time. Mister, you can leave the time to me." See here, he suddenly rolled up his sleeve and showed upon his forearm a peculiar sign which appeared to have been branded "Costs" there. It was a circle with a triangle within it. "Do you know what that means?" "I neither know nor care. Well, you will know. I'll promise you that you won't be much older either. Perhaps Mazzetti can tell Cost you something about it. As to you, Eddie, you'll come back to me on your knees. Do you hear, girl, on your knees? And then I'll tell you what your punishment may be. You've sowed, and by Costs the Lord how see that you reap." He glanced at them both in fury. Then he turned upon his heel, and an instant later the outer door had banged behind him for a few moments. McMurdo and the Costs girl stood in silence. Then she threw her arms around him. "Oh, Jack, how brave you were, but it is no use. You must fly tonight. Jack, tonight, it's your only hope. He will have your Costs' life. I read it in his horrible eyes, or chance have you, against a dozen of them, with Boss McGinty and all the power of the lodge behind them." McMurdo disengaged her hands, kissed her, and gently pushed Costs her back into a chair, their accoutrement there. "Don't be disturbed or fear for me. I'm a free man myself. I'm after telling your father about it. Maybe I'm no better than the Costs others, so don't make a saint of me. Perhaps you hate me too, now that I've told you as much hates you, Jack. While life lasts, I could never do that. I've heard that there is no harm in Costs being a free man anywhere but here, so why should I think the verse of you for that? But if you are a free man, Jack, why should you not go down and make a Costs friend of Boss McGinty? Oh, hurry, Jack, hurry, get your word in first, or the hounds will be on your trail." "I was thinking the same thing," said McMurdo. "I'll go right now and fix Costs it. You can tell your father that I'll sleep here tonight and find some other quarters in the morning." The bar of McGinty's saloon was crowded as usual, for it was the favorite loafing place. Costs, of all the rougher elements of the town, the man was popular for. He had a rough, jovial disposition, which formed a mask covering a great deal which lay behind it. But apart from this popularity, the Costs fear in which he was held throughout the township, and indeed down the whole 30 miles of the valley and past the mountains on each side of it, was enough in itself to fill his bar, for none could Costs afford to neglect his goodwill beside those secret powers which it was universally believed that he exercised in so pitiless a fashion. He was a high public official, a municipal councillor, and a commissioner of roads elected to Costs the office through the votes of the ruffians who in turn expected to receive favours at his hands. Assessments and taxes were enormous. The public works were notoriously neglected. The accounts were slurred over by bribed auditors, and Costs, the decent citizen, was terrorised into paying public blackmail and holding his tongue, lest some worse thing before him. Thus it was that year by year, McGinty's diamond pins became more obtrusive, his gold chains more weighty, Costs a cross, a more gorgeous vest, and his saloon stretched farther and farther until it threatened to absorb one whole side of the market square. McMurdo pushed open the swinging door of the saloon and made his way amid the Cost's crowd of men within, through an atmosphere blurred with tobacco smoke and heavy with the smell of spirits. The place was brilliantly lighted, and the huge heavy gilt mirrors upon every wall reflected and multiplied the garish Cost's illumination. There were several bartenders in their shirt sleeves hard at work, mixing drinks for the loungers who fringed the broad brass-trimmed counter at the far end, with his body resting upon the bar and a cigar stuck at an Cost's acute angle. From the corner of his mouth stood a tall, strong, heavily built man who could be none other than the famous McGinty himself. He was a black-mange giant, bearded to the cheekbones, and with Cost's a shock of raven hair which fell to his collar. His complexion was as swarthy as that of an Italian, and his eyes were of a strange dead black, which combined with a slight squint, gave them a particularly Cost's sinister appearance. All else in the man, his noble proportions, his fine features and his frank bearing fitted in with that jovial man-to-man manner which he affected here, one would say is a bluff. Cost's honest fellow whose heart would be sound however rude his outspoken words might seem. It was only when those dead, dark eyes, deep and remorseless, were turned upon a man that he shrank within himself. Cost's feeling that he was face to face with an infinite possibility of latent evil, with a strength and courage and cunning behind it, which made it 1,000 times more dead, having had a good look at his man, Cost's. McMurdo elbowed his way forward with his usual careless audacity and pushed himself through the little group of courtiers who were fawning upon the powerful boss, laughing uproariously at the smallest of his jokes. The young stranger's bold grey eyes, Cost's looked back fearlessly through their glasses, heard the deadly black ones which turned sharply upon him. "Well, young man, I can't call your face to mind. I'm new here, Mr. McGinty. You are not so new. Cost's that. You can't give a gentleman his proper title. He's Counselor McGinty, young man," said a voice from the group. "I'm sorry, Counselor. I'm strange to the ways of the place, but I was advised to." "Cost's, see you well. You see me. This is all there is. What do you think of me?" "Well, it's early days. If your heart is as big as your body and your soul is fine as Cost's your face, then I'd ask for nothing better," said McMurdo Beegy. "You've got an Irish tongue in your head anyhow," cried the saloon keeper, not quite certain whether to humour this audacious visitor or to stand upon his Cost's dignity. "So you are good enough to pass my appearance?" "Sure," said McMurdo, "and you were told to see me, I was." "And who told you, Brother Scanlon of large 341 Vermissa? I drink your health, Counselor." "Cost's, and who are better acquaintances?" He raised a glass with which he had been served to his lips and elevated his little finger. As he drank it, McGinty, who had been watching him, narrowly raised Cost's his thick black eyebrows. "No, it's like that, is it?" said he. "I'll have to look a bit closer into this, Mr. McMurdo. A bit closer, Mr. McMurdo. But we don't take folk on Cost's trust in these parts, nor believe all we're told. Neither come in here for a moment." Behind the bar there was a small room there lined with barrels. McGinty carefully closed the door and Cost seated himself on one of them, biting thoughtfully on his cigar and surveying his companion with those disquieting eyes. For a couple of minutes he sat in complete silence. McMurdo bought the inspection cheerfully, Cost's, one hand in his coat pocket, the other twisting his brown moustache. Suddenly, McGinty stooped and produced a wicked-looking revolver. "See here, my joker," said he, "if I thought you were playing any Cost's game on us, it would be short work for you." "This is a strange welcome," McMurdo answered, with some dignity with the bodymaster. "Have a larger freeman to give to a stranger brother." "Aye, but it's just Cost's that same that you have to prove," said McGinty. "And God help you if you fail. Where were you made large 29 Chicago when June 24, 1872? What bodymaster James H. Scott, who is your district ruler?" "Cost's." "Matalamu Wilson. You seem glib enough in your tests. What are you doing here, working the same as you? But a poorer job. You have your back answer." "Quick enough. Yes, I was always quick of speech." "Cost's." "Saw you quick of action? I've had that name among those that knew me best." "Well, we'll try you sooner than you think. Have you heard anything of the lodge in these parts?" "I've heard that it takes a Costsman to be a brother true for you, Mr. McMurdo. Why did you leave Chicago?" I'm damned if I tell you that McGinty opened his eyes. He was not used to being answered in such fashion, and it amused Cost's him. "Why won't you tell me?" because no brother may tell another a lie. Then the truth is too bad to tell, you can put it that way if you like. See here, Mr. U. Costs. Can't expect me as bodymaster to pass into a larger man for whose past he can't answer. McMurdo looked puzzled. Then he took a warm newspaper cutting from an inner pocket. You wouldn't squeal on a costs fellow, said he. I'll wipe my hand your face if you say such words to me, cried McGinty hotly. You are right, Counselor, said McMurdo meekly. I should apologize. I spoke without thought. Well, I costs know that I am safe in your hands. Look at that clipping. McGinty glanced his eyes over the account of the shooting of one Janus Pinto in the Lake Saloon, Market Street, Chicago, in the new year. Costs week of 1874 your work, he asked. As he handed back the paper, McMurdo nodded. Why did you shoot him? I was helping Uncle Sam to make dollars. Maybe mine were not as good gold as his, Costs, but they looked as well and were cheaper to make. This man Pinto helped me to shove the queer to do what well it means to pass the dollars out in circulation. Costs. Then he said he would split. Maybe he did split. I didn't wait to see, I just killed him and lighted out for the cold country. Why the cold country? Because I'd read in the papers that they weren't too. Costs particular in those parts. McGinty laughed. He were first a coiner and then a murderer. And you came to these parts because you thought you'd be welcome. That's about the size of it, McMurdo, Costs, answered. Well, I guess you'll go far say, can you make those dollars yet? McMurdo took half a dozen from his pocket. Those never passed the Philadelphia Mint, said he. You don't say, McGinty hold them too. Costs the light in his enormous hand, which was hairy as a gorilla's. I can see no difference, Carr. You'll be a mighty useful brother. I'm thinking we can do with a bad man or two among us, friend. Costs. McMurdo, for there are times when we have to take our own part, would soon be against the wall if we didn't shove back at those that were pushing us. Well, I guess I'll do my share of shoving with. Costs. The rest of the boys, you seem to have a good nerve you didn't squirm. When I shoved this gun at you, it was not me that was in danger. Who then? It was you. Counselor McMurdo drew a cocked pistol from the side pocket of his pea jacket. I was covering you all the time. I guess my shot would have been as quick as yours. My guard McGinty flushed an angry red. Costs, and then burst into a war of laughter. Say we've had no such holy terror come to hound this many a year. I reckon the lodge will learn to be proud of you well. Costs. What the hell do you want? And can I speak along with the gentleman for 5 minutes? But you must butt in on us. The bartender stood abashed. I'm sorry, Counselor, but it's Ted Baldwin, he says. Costs. He must sieved this very minute. The message was unnecessary, for the set, cruel face of the man himself was looking over the servant's shoulder. He pushed the bartender out and closed the Costs door on him. So, said he, with a furious glance at McMurdo, you got here first, did you? I have a word to say to you, Counselor, about this man. Then say it here and now before my face, cried Costs McMurdo. I'll say it at my own time in my own way. Tut tut, said McGinty, getting off his barrel. This will never do. We have a new brother here, Baldwin, and it's not for us. Costs to greet him in such fashion. Hold out your hand, man, and make it up. Never, cried Baldwin. In a fury, I've offered to fight him if he thinks I have wronged him, said Costs McMurdo. I'll fight him with fists, or if that won't satisfy him, I'll fight him any other way he chooses. Now I'll leave it to you, Counselor, to judge between us as a bodymaster should. What is it then? Costs. A young lady, she's free to choose for herself, as she cried Baldwin, as between two brothers of the lodge. I should say that she was said the boss. Well, that's your ruling, is it? Yes, it is, Ted Baldwin. Costs, said McGinty, with a wicked stare. Is it you that would dispute it? He would throw over one that has stood by you this 5 years, in favor of a man that you never before in your life. You're not. Costs bodymaster for life, Jack McGinty, and by God, when next it comes to a vote, the Counselor sprang at him like a tiger. His hand closed round the other's neck, and he hurled him back across one of the Costs barrels. In his mad fury, he would have squeezed the life out of him if McMurdo had not interfered. Easy, Counselor, for heaven's sake. Go easy, he cried, as he dragged him back. McGinty released his hold, and Baldwin, Costs, cowed and shaken, gasping for breath and shivering in every limb, as one who was looked over the very edge of death, sat up on the barrel over which he had been hurled. You've been asking for it. There's Costs many a day, Ted Baldwin. Now you've got it, cried McGinty, his huge chest rising and falling. Maybe you think if I was voted down for Bodymaster, you would find yourself in my shoes. Costs, it's for the lodge to say that, but so long as I am the chief, I'll have no man lift his voice against me on my rulings. I have nothing against you, mumbled Baldwin, feeling his throat. Well then, Costs, cried the other, relapsing in a moment into a bluff joviality. We're all good friends again, and there's an end of the matter. He took a bottle of champagne down from the shelf and twisted out the Costs cork. See now, he continued, as he filled 3 high glasses, let us drink the quarrelling toast of the lodge after that. As you know, there can be no bad blood between us. Now, then, the left hand on the Costs apple of my throat. I say to you, Ted Baldwin, what is the offence, sir? The clouds are heavy, answered Baldwin, but they will forever brighten, and this I swear. The men drank their glasses, and Costs. The same ceremony was performed between Baldwin and McMurdo there, cried McGinty, rubbing his hands. That's the end of the black blood. You come, and a large discipline, if it goes further, and that's a heavy Costs. And in these parts his brother Baldwin knows, and as you will damn soon find out, brother McMurdo, if you ask for trouble, faith, I'd be slow to do that, said McMurdo. He held out his hand to Baldwin. Costs. I'm quick to quarrel, and quick to forgive. It's my heart Irish blood, they tell me, but it's over for me, and I bear no grudge. Baldwin had to take the proffered hand for the baleful eye of the terrible Costs. Boss was upon him, but his sullen face showed how little the words of the other had moved him. McGinty clapped them both on the shoulders. Tut, these girls, feast girls, he cried, to think that the same Costs petticoats should come between 2 of my boys. It's the devil's own luck. Well, it's the colleen inside of them that must settle the question, for it's outside the jurisdiction of a Bodymaster and the Costs. Lord be praised for that. We have enough on us without the women as well. You'll have to be affiliated to Lodge 3. For one, brother McMurdo, we have our own ways and methods different from Chicago. Costs. Saturday night is our meeting, and if you come den, we'll make you free forever of the Vermissa Valley, Chapter 3 Lodge, 341 Vermissa, on the day following the evening, which had contained so many exciting events. Costs. McMurdo moved his lodgings from old Jacob Shaft Ers and took up his quarters at the widow McNamara's on the extreme outskirts of the town Scanlon, his original acquaintance aboard to train at occasion. Shortly afterwards, too, Costs move into Vermissa, and the 2 lodged together. There was no other boarder, and the hostess was an easygoing old Irish woman who left them to themselves so that they had a freedom for speech and action. Costs welcome to men who had secrets in common. Shafter had relented to the extent of letting McMurdo come to his meals there when he liked, so that his intercourse with Etty was by no means broken. On the Costs' contrary, it drew closer and more intimate as the weeks went by in his bedroom at his new abode. McMurdo felt it safe to take out the coining molds, and under many a pledge, costs of secrecy, a number of brothers from the lodge were allowed to come in and see them, each carrying away in his pocket some examples of the false money so cunningly struck that there was never Costs the slightest difficulty or danger in passing it. Why, with such a wonderful art at his command, McMurdo should condescend to work at all was a perpetual mystery to his companions, though he made it clear to Costs anyone who asked him that if he lived without any visible means, it would very quickly bring the police upon his track. One policeman was indeed after him already, but the incident, as luck would, Costs have it, did the adventurer a great deal more good than harm. After the first introduction, there were few evenings when he did not find his way to McGinty's saloon there to make closer. Costs' acquaintance with the boys, which was the jovial title by which the dangerous gang who infested the place were known to one another. His dashing manner and fearlessness of speech made him a favorite with them all, while the rapid Costs and scientific way in which he polished off his antagonist in an all-in barroom scrap earned the respect of that rough community. Another incident, however, raised him even higher in their estimation. Just at the crowded hour, one Costs night, the door opened, and a man entered with the quiet blue uniform and peaked cap of the mine police. This was a special body raised by the railways and colliery owners to supplement the efforts of the ordinary Costs. Civil police who were perfectly helpless in the face of the organized ruffianism which terrorized the district. There was a hush as he entered, and many a curious glance was cast at him, but the relations, costs, between policemen and criminals are peculiar in some parts of the States, and McGinty himself, standing behind his counter, showed no surprise when the policeman enrolled himself among his customers a straight whiskey for the costs. Night is bitter, said the police officer. I don't think we have met before, Counselor. You'll be the new captain, said McGinty. Let's so we're looking to you, Counselor, and to the other leading cost citizens to help us in upholding law and order in this township. Captain Marvin has my name. We'd do better without you, Captain. Marvin, said McGinty coldly. We have our own police of the township. No costs need for any imported goods. What are you but the paid to love the capitalists hired by them to club or shoot your poor, a fellow citizen? Well, we won't argue about that, said the cost police officer good-humouredly. I expect we all do our duties same as we see it, but we can't all see it the same. He had drunk off his glass, and had costs turned to go, when his eyes fell upon the face of Jack McMurdo, who was scowling at his elbow. Hello, he cried, looking him up and down. Here's an old acquaintance. McMurdo shrank away from costs him. I was never a friend to you, nor any other cursed copper in my life, said he. An acquaintance isn't always a friend, said the police captain, grinning. You're Jack McMurdo of Chicago, right? Costs enough. And don't you deny it. McMurdo shrugged his shoulders. I'm not denying it, said he. You think I'm ashamed of my old name? You've got good cause to be, anyhow. What costs the devil do you mean by that? He roared with his fists clenched. No Jack bluster won't do with me. I was an officer in Chicago before ever I came to this darned coal bunker, and I know a costs Chicago crook. When I see one McMurdo's face fell, don't tell me that you're Marvin of the Chicago Central, he cried. Just the same old Teddy Marvin, at your service. We haven't forgotten the costs. Shooting of Jonas Pinto up there. I never shot him, did you? Not. That's good. Impartial evidence, ain't it? Well, his death came in uncommon handy for you. Well, they would have had you for shoving. Costs. The queer, well, we can let that be bygones, but between you and me, and perhaps I'm going further in my duty in saying it, they could get no clear case against you, and Chicago's open to you tomorrow. Costs. I'm very well where I am. Well, I think I've given you the pointer, and you're a sulky dog not to thank me for it. Well, I suppose you mean well, and I do. Costs. Thank you, said McMurdo, in no very gracious manner, his mum with me, so long as I see you living on the straight, said the captain. But by the Lord, if you get off, after this, it's another story. So, costs good night to you, and good night, Counselor. He left the barroom, but not before he had created a local hero. McMurdo's deeds in far Chicago had been whispered before he had put off all costs, questions with a smile, as one who did not wish to have greatness thrust upon him. But now the thing was officially confirmed. The bar loafers crowded round him and shook him heartily by the hand. Costs. He was free of the community from that time on. He could drink hard and show little trace of it. But that evening at his mate Scanlon not been at hand to lead him home, the fated Costs hero would surely have spent his night under the bar on a Saturday night. McMurdo was introduced to the lodge he had thought to pass in without ceremony as being an initiate of Chicago, but costs. There were particular rites in Vermissa of which they were proud, and these had to be undergone by every postulant. The assembly met in a large room reserved for such purposes at the Union House. Costs some 60 members assembled at Vermissa, but that by no means represented the full strength of the organization. But there were several other lodges in the valley and others across the mountains on each side who exchanged members when costs. Any serious business was afoot, so that a crime might be done by men who were strangers to the locality altogether. There were not less than 500 scattered over the coal district in the bare costs assembly room. The men were gathered round a long table. At the site was a second one laden with bottles and glasses, on which some members of the company were already turning their eyes. Costs. McGinty sat at the head with a flat black velvet cap upon his shock of tangled black hair, and a coloured purple stole round his neck, so that he seemed to be a priest presiding over some costs diabolical ritual. To right and left of him were the higher lodge officials, the cruel, handsome face of Ted Baldwin among them. Each of these wore some scarf or medallion as emblem of his office. They costs were for the most part men of mature age, but the rest of the company consisted of young fellows from 18 to 25, the ready and capable agents who carried out the commands of their seniors among the costs. Older men were many whose features showed the tigerish, lawless souls within, but looking at the rank and file, it was difficult to believe that these eager and open-faced young fellows were in very truth a dangerous gang of murderers, Costs, whose minds had suffered such complete moral perversion that they took a horrible pride in their proficiency at the business, and looked with deepest respect at the man who had the reputation of making what they called a Costs clean job to their contorted natures. It had become a spirited and chivalrous thing to volunteer for service against some man who had never injured them, and whom in many cases they had never seen. Costs in their lives, the crime committed, they quarrelled as to who had actually struck the fatal blow, and amused one another, and accompanied by describing the cries and contortions of the murdered man at Costs. First, they had shown some secrecy in their arrangements, but at the time which this narrative describes their proceedings were extraordinarily open, for the repeated failure of the law had proved to them that on the one hand no Costs one would dare to witness against them, and on the other they had an unlimited number of staunch witnesses upon whom they could call, and a well-filled treasure chest from which they could Costs draw the funds to engage the best legal talent in the state. In 10 long years of outrage there had been no single conviction. The only danger that ever threatened the Scowrers lay in the victim himself, who, however outnumbered, Costs, and taken by surprise, might, and occasionally did, leave his mark upon his assailants. McMurdo had been warned that some ordeal lay before him, but no one would tell him in what it consisted. He, Costs, was led now into an outer room by 2 solemn brothers. Through the plank partition, he could hear the murmur of many voices from the assembly within. Once or twice he caught the sound of Costs' own name, and he knew that they were discussing his candidacy. Then there entered an inner guard with a green and gold sash across his chest. The bodymaster orders that he shall be trussed. Costs blinded and entered, said he, who the 3 of them removed his coat, turned up the sleeve of his right arm, and finally passed a rope round above the elbows and made it fast. They next placed a thick Costs' black cap right over his head and the upper part of his face, so that he could see nothing. He was then led into the assembly hall. It was pitch dark and very oppressive under his hood. He heard the Costs rustle and murmur of the people round him, and then the voice of McGinty sounded dull and distant through the covering of his ears. John McMurdo said, the voice, "Are you already a member of the ancient order of Costs?" "Freeman." He bowed in assent. "Who's your large number 29, Chicago?" He bowed again. "Dark nights are unpleasant," said the voice. "Yes, for strangers to travel," he answered. "The clouds are heavy." "Yes, a storm is approaching, other brethren." "Costs satisfied?" asked the bodymaster. There was a general murmur of assent. "We know, brother, by your sign, and by your countess' sign, that you are indeed one of us," said McGinty. "We would have you know, Costs, however, that in this county and in other counties of these parts we have certain rights and also certain duties of our own which call for good men. Are you ready to be tested?" "I am. Are you of stout?" Costs' heart. "I am take a stride forward to prove it," as the words were said. He felt 2 hard points in front of his eyes pressing upon them, so that it appeared as if he could not move forward without. Costs a danger of losing them nonetheless. He nerved himself to step resolutely out, and as he did so, the pressure melted away. There was a low murmur of applause. "He is of stout heart," said the voice. "Costs, can you bear pain as well as another?" he answered. "Test him." It was all he could do to keep himself from screaming out, for an agonizing pain shot through his forearm. He nearly fainted at the sudden Costs shock of it, but he bit his lip and clenched his hands to hide his agony. "I can take more than that," said he. This time there was loud applause. A finer first appearance had never been made in Costs. The lodge hands clapped him on the back, and the hood was plucked from his head. He stood blinking and smiling, amid the congratulations of the brothers. "One last word. Brother McMurdo," said McGinty, "you, Costs, have already sworn the oath of secrecy and fidelity, and you are aware that the punishment for any breach of it is instant and inevitable death." "I am," said McMurdo. "And you accept the rule of the Costs bodymaster for the time being, under all circumstances?" "I do then, in the name of large 341 Vermissa. I welcome you to its privileges and debates. You will put the liquor on the table, brother Scanlon, and Costs We will drink to our worthy brother McMurdo's coat had been brought to him, but before putting it on, he examined his right arm, which still smarted heavily there on the flesh of the forearm, was a cost circle with the triangle within it, deep and red, as the branding iron had left it. One or two of his neighbours pulled up their sleeves and showed their own lodge marks. We've all had it said one, but not. Costs hard, as brave as you over it, Tut. It was nothing, said he, but it burned and ached all the same when the drinks which followed the ceremony of initiation had all be disposed of the business of the lodge. Costs. Proceeded McMurdo, accustomed only to the prosaic performances of Chicago, listened with open ears, and more surprised than he ventured to show to what followed the first business on the agenda paper, said McGinty, is to read the following letter. Costs, from Division Master Windell of Merton County Large to 49. He says, Dear Sir, there is a job to be done on Andrew Rear of Rear and Sturmash cold owners near this place. You will remember that your Costs Large owes us a return, having had the service of 2 brethren in the matter of the patrolman last fall. You will send 2 good men. They will be taken charge of by Treasurer Higgins of this lodge. Costs, whose address you know, he will show them when to act, and where yours in freedom. J.W. Windell, D.M. AOF Windell has never refused us when we have had occasion to. Costs ask for the loan of a man or 2, and it is not for us to refuse him. McGinty paused and looked round the room with his dull, malevolent eyes. Who will volunteer for the job? Several young Costs fellows held up their hands. The bodymaster looked at them with an approving smile. You'll do Tiger Cormac if you handle it as well as you did the last. You won't be wrong. And you, Wilson? I have. Costs, no pistol, said the volunteer, a mere boy in his teens. It's your first, is it not? Well, you have to be blooded sometime. It will be a great start for you. As to the Costs pistol, you'll find it waiting for you, or I'm mistaken if you report yourselves on Monday. It will be time enough. You'll get a great welcome when you return. Any reward this time? Asked Cormac. Costs thick, set, dark-faced, brutal-looking young man, whose ferocity had earned him the nickname of Tiger. Never mind the reward, you just do it for the honor of the thing. Maybe when it is. Costs done. There will be a few odd dollars at the bottom of the box. What is the man done? Asked young Wilson. Sure, it's not for the likes of you to ask what the man Costs has done. He's been judged over there. That's no business of ours. All we have to do is carry it out for them, same as they would for us. Speaking of that, 2 brothers from the Merton Lodge are Costs coming over to us next week to do some business in this quarter. Who are they? As someone faith, it is wiser not to ask. If you know nothing, you can testify nothing, and no trouble can come of it. Costs the day a man who will make a clean job when they are about it. And time to cried. Ted Baldwin, Foker, getting out of hand. In these parts, it was only last week that Costs, 3 of our men were turned off by Foreman Bleicher. It's been owing him a long time, and he'll get it full and proper. Get what McMurdo whispered to his neighbor, the business end of a buckshot cartridge. Costs, cried the man with a loud laugh. What? Think you of our ways? Brother McMurdo's criminal souls seem to have already absorbed the spirit of the vile association of which he was now a member. Costs. I like it. Well said. Here's a proper place for a lad of metal. Several of those who sat around heard his words and applauded them. What's that? Cried the black-maned bodymaster from the end of Costs the table. There's our new brother, sir, who finds our ways to his taste. McMurdo rose to his feet for an instant. I would say, eminent bodymaster, that if a man should be wanted, I should take it as an Costs' honor to be chosen to help the lodge. There was great applause at this. It was felt that a new sun was pushing its rim above the horizon to some of the elders. Costs, it seemed that the progress was a little too rapid. I would move, said the Secretary Harraway, a vulture-faced old greybeard, who sat near the chairman, that Brother McMurdo should wait until it is the good Costs' pleasure of the lodge to employ him. Sure, that was what I meant. I'm in your hands, said McMurdo. Time will come, brother, said the chairman. We have marked you down as a willing man, Costs, and we believe that you will do good work in these parts. There is a small matter tonight, in which you may take a hand. If it so pleases you, I will wait for something that is worthwhile. Costs, you can come tonight anyhow, and it will help you to know what we stand for in this community. I will make the announcement later. Meanwhile, he glanced at his agenda paper. I have 1 or 2. Costs more points to bring before the meeting. First of all, I will ask the treasurer as to our bank balance. There is the pension to Jim Carr, Noir's widow. He was struck, costs down, doing the work of the lodge, and it is for us to see that she is not the loser Jim was shot last month when they tried to kill Chester Wilcox of Molly Creek, McMurdo's neighbor informed him. Costs. The funds are good at the moment, said the treasurer with the bank book in front of him. The firms have been generous of late. Max Linder & Co. paid $500 to costs. Be left alone, Walker Brothers sent in $100, but I took it on myself to return it and ask for $5 if I do not hear by Wednesday. Their winding gear. Costs may get out of order. We had to burn their breaker last year before they became reasonable. Then the West Section Coal Company has paid its annual contribution. We have enough on hand to meet any obligations. Costs. What about Archie Swindon? Asked a brother. He is sold out and left the district. The old devil left a note for us to say that he had rather be a free crossing sweeper in New York than a Costs large mine owner. Under the power of a ring of blackmailers, by God, it was as well that he made a break for it before the note reached us. I guess he won't. Costs. Show his face in this valley. Again, an elderly, clean-shaved man with a kindly face and a good brow rose from the end of the table which faced the chairman. Mr. Treasurer, he asked, may I ask who was? Costs bought the property of this man that we have driven out of the district. Yes, Brother Morris. It has been bought by the State and Merton County Railroad Company, and who bought the mines of Costs Totem and of Liss that came into the market in the same way last year, the same company, Brother Morris, and who bought the ironworks of Manson and of Schumann and Evander here, and of Out. Costs Wood, which have all been given up of late. They were all bought by the West Gilman and General Mining Company. I don't see, Brother Morris, said the chairman, that it matters to us who buys. Costs them, since they can't carry them out of the district. With all respect to you, eminent bodymaster, I think it may matter very much to us. This process has been going on now for 10 long years. We are, Costs, gradually driving all the small men out of trade. What is the result? We find in their places great companies like the Railroad or the General Iron, who have their directors in New York, or Costs, Philadelphia, and care nothing for our threats. We can take it out of their local bosses, but it only means that others will be sent in their stead, and we are making it dangerous for ourselves. Costs. The small men could not harm us. They had not the money nor the power. So long as we did not squeeze them to dry, they would stay on under our power. But if Costs, these big companies find that we stand between them and their profits, they will spare no pains and no expense to hunt us down and bring us to court. There was a hush at these ominous words, and every Costs' face darkened, as gloomy looks were exchanged. So omnipotent and unchallenged had they been, but the very thought that there was possible retribution in the background had been banished from their minds, and yet the idea struck a chill. Costs to the most reckless of them. It is my advice, the speaker continued, that we go easier upon the small men on the day that they have all been driven out. The power of this society will have been broken. Costs' unwelcome truths are not popular. There were angry cries as the speaker resumed his seat. McGinty rose with gloom upon his brow. Brother Morris, said he, you were always a croaker so long as the members, Costs, of this large stand together. There is no power in the United States that can touch them. Sure, have we not tried it often enough in the law courts? I expect the big companies will find it. Costs easier to pay than to fight, same as the little companies do. And now, brethren, McGinty took off his black velvet cap, and his stole as he spoke. This large has finished its business for the evening. Costs, save for one small matter, which may be mentioned when we are parting, the time has now come for fraternal refreshment and for harmony. Strange indeed is human nature. Here were these men to whom Costs' murder was familiar, who again and again had struck down the father of the family, some man against whom they had no personal feeling, without one thought of compunction or of compassion for his weeping wife or helpless children. And Costs, yet the tender or pathetic in music, could move them to tears. McMurdo had a fine tenor voice, and if he had failed to gain the goodwill of the lodge before it could no longer have been withheld after Costs, she had thrilled them with I'm Sitting on the Stile Mary and on the Banks of Allan Water in his very first night, The new recruit had made himself one of the most popular of the brethren, marked already. Costs for advancement and high office. There were other qualities needed, however, besides those of good fellowship, to make a worthy freeman, and of these he was given an example before the evening was over. The whiskey bottle had passed round. Costs many times, and the men were flushed and ripe for mischief when their bodymaster rose once more. "To dress them, boys," said he. "There's one man in this town that wants trimming up, and costs, it's for you to see that he gets it." I'm speaking of James Stanger of the Herald. You've seen how he's been opening his mouth against us. Again there was a murmur of assent, with many a muttered "Costs." Oath McGinty took a slip of paper from his waistcoat pocket. "Law and order. That's how he heads it. Reign of terror in the coal and iron district. 12 years have now elapsed since the first assassinations, which proved the Costs' existence of a criminal organization in our midst. From that day these outrages have never ceased until now. They have reached a pitch which makes us the opprobrium of the civilized world. Is it costs for such results as this that our great country welcomes to its bosom the alien who flies from the despotisms of Europe? Is it that they shall themselves become tyrants over the very men who have given costs them shelter, and that a state of terrorism and lawlessness should be established under the very shadow of the sacred folds of the starry flag of freedom, which would raise horror in our costs' minds? If we read of it as existing under the most effete monarchy of the East, the men are known, the organization is patent and public. How long are we to endure it? Can we forever live? Sure, I've read costs enough of the slush, cried the chairman, tossing the paper down upon the table. That's what he says of us. The question I'm asking you is, what shall we say to him? Kill him, cried a dozen fierce voices. Costs. I protest against that, said Brother Morris, the man of the good brow and shaved face. I tell you, brethren, that our hand is too heavy in this valley, and that there will come a point where, in costs self-defense, every man will unite to crush us out. James Stanger is an old man. He is respected in the township and a district. His paper stands for all that is solid. Costs in the valley. If that man is struck down, there will be a stir through this state that will only end with our destruction. And how would they bring about our destruction? Mr. Stand back, cried McGinty. Is it by costs the police? Sure, half of them are in our pay, and half of them afraid of us. Or is it by the law courts in the judge? Haven't we tried that before now? And costs. Whatever came of it, there is a Judge Lynch that might try the case, said Brother Morris. A general shout of anger greeted the suggestion. I have but to raise my finger, cried McGinty, and I, costs, could put 200 men into this town that would clear it out from end to end. Then suddenly raising his voice and bending his huge black brows into a terrible frown. See here, Brother Morris, I, costs, have my eye on you, and have had for some time. You've no heart yourself, and you try to take the heart out of others. It will be an ill day for you, brother. Costs Morris, when your own name comes on our agenda paper, and I'm thinking that it's just there that I ought to place it. Morris had turned deadly pale, and his knees seemed to give way under him as he costs fell back into his chair. He raised his glass in his trembling hand and drank before he could answer. I apologize, eminent bodymaster, to you, and to every brother in this lodge, if I have said more than I should. Costs. I'm a faithful member, you all know that, and it is my fear lest evil come to the lodge, which makes me speak in Hank's words, but I have greater trust in your judgment than in my own eminent Costs bodymaster, and I promise you that I will not offend again. The bodymaster's scowl relaxed as he listened to the humble words, very good Brother Morris. It's myself that would be sorry if it were. Costs, needful to give you a lesson, but so long as I'm in this chair we shall be a united lodge in word and in deed. And now, boys, he continued, looking round at the company, I'll say this much, costs, that if Stanger got his full deserts, there would be more trouble than we need ask, for these editors hang together, and every journal in the state would be crying out for police and troops. But I, costs, guess you can give him a pretty severe warning. Will you fix it, Brother Baldwin Shaw? Said the young man eagerly. How many will you take? Half a dozen, and 2 to guard the floor. You'll come Cower, and costs you Mansell, and you Scanlon, and the 2 Willoughbys, I promise. The new brother he should go, said the chairman. Ted Baldwin looked at McMurdo with eyes which showed that he had not forgotten costs, nor forgiven. Well, he can come if he wants, he said in a surly voice. That's enough. The sooner we get to work, the better. The company broke up, with shouts and yells and snatches of drunken song. Costs. The bar was still crowded with revelers, and many of the brethren remained there. The little band who had been told off for duty passed out into the street, proceeding in twos and threes along the Cost sidewalk so as not to provoke attention. It was a bitterly cold night, with a half-moon shining brilliantly in a frosty star-spangled sky. The men stopped and gathered in a yard which faced a high Costs building. The words Vermissa Herald were printed in gold lettering. Between the brightly lit windows from within came the clanking of the printing press. "Here," you said, Baldwin to McMurdo, "you can Costs stand below at the door and see that the road is kept open for us. Arthur Willoughby can stay with you. You others come with me. Have no fear, boys, for we have a dozen witnesses that we are in." Costs. The Union Bar at this very moment. It was nearly midnight, and the street was deserted save for one or two revelers upon their way home. The party crossed the road, and pushing open the Costs door of the newspaper office, Baldwin and his men rushed in and up the stair, which faced them. McMurdo and another man remained below from the room. Above came a shout, a cry for help, and then the Costs sound of trampling feet and of falling chairs. An instant later, a grey-haired man rushed out on the landing. He was seized before he could get farther, and his spectacles came tinkling down to Costs. McMurdo's feet there was a thud and a groan. He was on his face, and half a dozen sticks were clattering together as they fell upon him. He arrived, and his long, thin limbs quivered under the blows. Costs. The others ceased at last, but Baldwin, his cruel face set in an infernal smile, was hacking at the man's head, which he vainly endeavoured to defend with his arms. His white hair was dabbled with Costs' patches of blood. Baldwin was still stooping over his victim, putting in a short, vicious blow whenever he could see a part exposed, when McMurdo dashed up the stairs and pushed him back. "You'll Costs kill," the man said. "He drop it. Curse you," he cried. "Who are you to interfere, you that are new to the lodge? Stand back." He raised his stick, but McMurdo had whipped his pistol out of his pocket. "Costs, stand back yourself," he cried. "I'll blow your face in if you lay a hand on me. As to the lodge, wasn't it the order of the body master that the man was not to be Costs killed? And what are you doing but killing him?" "It's the truth, he says," remarked one of the men. "By gar, you'd best hurry yourselves," cried the man. "Below the windows are all lighting up." Costs. "And you'll have the whole town here inside of 5 minutes." There was indeed the sound of shouting in the street, and a little group of compositors and pressmen who was forming in the hall. Costs below and nerving itself to action. Leaving the limp and motionless body of the editor of the Stair, the criminals rushed down and made their way swiftly along the street, having reached the Union House. Costs, some of them mixed with the crowd in McGinty's saloon, whispering across the bar to the boss that the job had been well carried through others, and among them McMurdo broke away into side streets, and so by Costs' devious paths to their own homes. Chapter 4. The Valley of Fear. When McMurdo awoke next morning, he had good reason to remember his initiation into the lodge. His head ached with the effect of the Costs drink, and his arm, where he had been branded, was hot and swollen. Having his own peculiar source of income, he was irregular in his attendance at his work, so he had a late breakfast, and Costs remained at home for the morning, writing a long letter to a friend afterwards. He read the Daily Herald in a special column put in at the last moment. He read outrage at the Herald office. Costs. Editor seriously injured. It was a short account of the facts with which he was himself more familiar than the writer could have been. It ended with the statement, "The matter is now in the hands Costs of the police, but it can hardly be hoped that their exertions will be attended by any better results than in the past. Some of the men were recognized, and there is hope that a conviction may be." Costs obtained the source of the outrage. Was it need hardly be said that infamous society which has held this community in bondage for so long a period, and against which the Herald has taken so uncompromising a stand? Mr. Costs. Stanger's many friends will rejoice to hear that though he has been cruelly and brutally beaten, and though he has sustained severe injuries about the head, there is no immediate danger to his life. Costs below it stated that a guard of police armed with Winchester rifles had been requisitioned for the defense of the office. McMurdo had laid down the paper and was lighting his pipe with a hand which was Costs shaky from the excesses of the previous evening when there was a knock outside, and his landlady brought him a note which had just been handed in by a lad. It was unsigned, and ran thus: I should Costs wish to speak to you, but would rather not do so in your house. You will find me beside the flagstaff upon Miller Hill, if you will come there. Now I have something. Costs which it is important for you to hear, and for me to say. McMurdo read the note twice, with the utmost surprise, for he could not imagine what it meant, or who was the author of. Costs it. Had it been in a feminine hand, he might have imagined that it was the beginning of one of those adventures which had been familiar enough in his past life, but it was the writing of a Costs man, and of a well-educated one too. Finally, after some hesitation, he determined to see the matter through. Miller Hill is an ill-kept public park in the very centre of the town in summer. Costs it is a favourite resort of the people, but in winter it is desolate enough. From the top of it, one has a view not only of the whole straggling, grimy town, but of the winding valley beneath, with its Costs scattered mines and factories blackening the snow on each side of it, and of the wooded and white-capped ranges flanking it. McMurdo strolled up the winding path hedged in with evergreens until he reached the deserted restaurant which, Costs, forms the centre of summer gaiety. Beside it was a bare flagstaff, and underneath it a man, his hat worn down and the collar of his overcoat turned up. When he turned his face, McMurdo saw that it was Costs' brother Morris, who had incurred the anger of the bodymaster the night before the lodge sign was given and exchanged as mad. I wanted to have a word with you, Mr. McMurdo, said the older man, speaking with Costs, the hesitation which showed that he was on delicate ground. It was kind of you to come. Why did you not put your name to the note? One has to be cautious. Mr. Moore never knows in times like these. Costs how a thing may come back to. One never knows, either who to trust or who not to trust. Surely one may trust brothers of the lodge. No, not always, cried Morris with vehemence. Whatever we Costs say, even what we think seems to go back to that man McGinty. Look here, said McMurdo sternly. It was only last night, as you know well, that I swore good faith to our bodymaster. Would you be asking Costs me to break my oath? If that is the view you take, said Morris, sadly, I can only say that I am sorry, and I gave you the trouble to come and meet me. Things Costs have come to a bad pass when two free citizens cannot speak their thoughts to each other. McMurdo, who had been watching his companion very narrowly, relaxed somewhat in his bearing. Sure, I spoke for myself. Costs only, said he. I am a newcomer, as you know. I'm strange to it all. It is not for me to open my mouth, Mr. Morris, and if you think well to say anything to me, I am Costs here to hear it, and to take it back to boss. McGinty, said Morris bitterly. Indeed, then, you do me injustice there, cried McMurdo. For myself, I am loyal to the lodge, and so I tell you straight, but I, Costs, would be a poor creature if I were to repeat to any other what you might say to me in confidence. It will go no further than me, though I warn you that, Costs, you may get neither help nor sympathy. I have given up looking for either the one or the other, said Morris. I may be putting my very life in your hands by Costs what I say, but bad as you are, and it seemed to me last night that you were shaping to be as bad as the worst. Still you are new to it, and your conscience cannot, Costs, yet to be as heartened as theirs. That was why I thought to speak with you. Well, what have you to say? If you give me away, may a curse be on you. Sure, I said it. Costs would not. I would ask you then, when you joined the Freeman Society in Chicago and swore vows of charity and fidelity, did it ever cross your mind that you might find it would lead you to crime if Costs? You call it crime, McMurdo answered. Call it crime, cried Morris, his voice vibrating with passion. You have seen little of it, if you can call it anything else. Was it crime last night when a man, Costs old enough to be your father, was beaten till the blood dripped from his white hairs? Who was that crime, or what else would you call it? There are some that would say it was war, said McMurdo. A war. Costs of two classes with all in, so that each struck as best it could. Well, did you think of such a thing when you joined the Freeman Society at Chicago? No. I'm Costs bound to say that I did not, nor did I when I joined it at Philadelphia. It was just a benefit club and a meeting place for one's fellows. Then I heard of this place. Costs cursed the hour that the name first fell upon my ears, and I came to better myself. Marker hot, to better myself, my wife, and 3 children came with me. I started a Costs dry goods store on the market square, and our prospered well. The word had gone round that I was a freeman, and I was forced to join the local lodge, same as Costs. You did last night. I have the badge of shame on my forearm and something worse branded on my heart. I found that I was under the orders of a black villain and costs. Caught in a meshwork of crime. What could I do? Every word I said to make things better was taken as treason, same as it was last night. I can't get away for all I have in costs. The world is in my store if I leave the society I know well, that it means murder to me, and God knows what to my wife and children. Oh man, 'tis awful. Awful, he put. Costs his hands to his face and his body shook with convulse. Sobs. McMurdo shrugged his shoulders. You were too soft for the job, said he. You had the wrong sword for such work. Costs. I had a conscience and a religion, but they made me a criminal among them. I was chosen for a job. If I backed down, I knew well what would come to me. Maybe I'm a coward. Costs. Maybe it's the thought of my poor little woman and the children that makes me one anyhow. I went. I guess it will haunt me forever. It was a lonely house 20 miles. Costs from here over the range yonder. I was told off with the door, same as you were last night. They could not trust me with the job the others went in when their costs came out. Their hands were crimson to the wrists. As we turned away, a child was screaming out of the house behind us. It was a boy of 5 who had seen his father murdered. I nearly fainted with costs the horror of it, and yet I had to keep a bold and smiling face for, well, I knew that if I did not, it would be out of my house that they would come next with costs their bloody hands, and it would be my little Fred that would be screaming for his father. But I was a criminal then. Par Sherrar in a murder, lost forever in this costs world, and lost also in the next. I am a good Catholic, but the priest would have no word with me when he heard I was a Scowrer, and I am excommunicated from my costs faith. That's how it stands with me, and I see you going down the same road, and I ask you what the end is to be. Are you ready to be a cold-blooded murderer also? Costs, or can we do anything to stop it? What would you do? Asked McMurdo, abruptly. He would not inform, God forbid, cried Morris. Sure, the very thought would cost me my life. That's well, said McMurdo. I'm costs. Thinking that you were a weak man, and that you make too much of the matter, too much wait till you've lived here longer. Look down the valley, see the cloud of 100 chimneys that overshadows it. Costs. I'll tell you that the cloud of murder hangs thicker and lower than that. Over the heads of the people it is the valley of fear, the valley of death, the terror. Costs is in the hearts of the people, from the dusk to the dawn. Wait, young man, and you will learn for yourself. Well, I'll let you know what I think when I've seen more, said McMurdo carelessly. What is costs very clear is that you are not the man for the place, and the sooner you sell out, if you only get a dime a dollar for what the business is worth, the better it. Costs will be for you. What you have said is safe with me, but by God, if I thought you were an informer. No, no, cried Morris piteously. Well that it rested that. I'll costs bear what you have said in mind, and maybe someday I'll come back to it. I expect you meant kindly by speaking to me like this. Now, I'll be getting home. One word before you go, said Morris. We costs may have been seen together. They may want to know what we've spoken about. Ah, that's well thought of. I offer you a clerkship in my store, and I refuse it. That's our business. Well, so long, brother. Costs. Morris, and may you find things go better with you in the future. That same afternoon, as McMurdo sat smoking, lost in thought, beside the stove of his sitting room, the door swung open, and its costs framework was filled with the huge figure of Boss McGinty. He passed the sign, and then seating himself opposite to the young man, he looked at him steadily for some time, a look which was costs as steadily returned. I'm not much of a visitor, brother McMurdo, he said at last. I guess I am too busy over the folk that visit me, but I thought I'd stretch a costs point and drop down to see you in your own house. I'm proud to see you here. Councillor McMurdo armed stirred heartily, bringing his whiskey bottle out of the cupboard. That's an honor that I had not expected. Costs. How's the arm? Asked the boss. McMurdo made a wry face. I'm not forgetting it, he said, but it's worth it. Yes, it's worth it. The other answered, to those that are loyal and go costs through with it, and are a help to the lodge, while B is speaking to brother Morris about on Miller Hill. This morning the question came so suddenly that it was well that he had his answer prepared. Costs. He burst into a hearty laugh. Morris didn't know I could earn a living here at home. He shan't know either, for he has got too much conscience for the likes of me, but he's a good-hearted old chap. It costs. Was his idea that I was at a loose end? and that he would do me a good turn by offering me a clerkship in a dry goods store. Oh, that was it. Yes, that was it. And costs. You refused it? Sure couldn't. I earned 10 times as much in my own bedroom with 4 hours work. That's so, but I wouldn't get about too much with Morris. Why not? Well, I guess because I tell you not. Costs. That's enough for most folk in these parts. It may be enough for most folk, but it ain't enough for me, Counselor, said McMurdo boldly. If you're a judge of men, you'll know that the swarthy giant. Costs glared at him, and his hairy paw closed for an instant round the glass as though he would hurl it at the head of his companion. Then he laughed in his loud, insincere fashion. You're a queer card, Costs, for sure, said he. Well, if you want reasons, I'll give them. Did Morris say nothing to you against the lodge? No, nor against me, no. Well, that's because he don't trust you, but in his heart he is. Costs. Not a loyal brother, we know that well. So we watch him, and we wait for the time to admonish him. I'm thinking that the time is drawing near. There's no room for Costs' scabby sheep in our pen. But if you keep company with a disloyal man, we might think that you were disloyal to see there's no chance of my keeping company with him. Freud, just like the man McMurdo, Costs answered, has to be in disloyal if it was any man but you. He would not use the word to me twice. Well, that's enough, said McGinty, draining off his glass. I came down to give you a Costs word in season, and you've had it. I'd like to know, said McMurdo, how you ever came to learn that I had spoken with Morris at all. McGinty laughed. It's my business to know what goes on in this Costs township, said he. I guess he'd best reckon on my hearing. All that passes well time's up, and I'll just say but his leave-taking was cut short, in a very unexpected fashion with a sudden crash. Costs. The door flew open, and 3 frowning, intent faces glared in at them from under the peaks of police caps. McMurdo sprang to his feet, and half drew his revolver, but his arm stopped midway, as Costs. She became conscious that 2 Winchester rifles were leveled at his head. A man in uniform advanced into the room, a 6-shooter in his hand. It was Captain Marvin, once of Chicago, and now of the Mine Constabulary. He, Costs, shook his head with a half-smile at McMurdo. I thought you'd be getting into trouble, Mr. Crooked McMurdo of Chicago, said he can't keep out of it. Can you take your hat and come along with us? Aye. Costs. Guess you'll pay for this, Captain, Marvin said. McGinty. Who are you? I'd like to know, to break into a house in this fashion and molest honest, law-abiding men. You're standing out in this deal. Counselor McGinty, said the police. Costs, Captain, we are not out after you, but after this man McMurdo. It is for you to help, not to hinder us in our duty. He's a friend of mine, and I'll answer for his costs. Conduct, said the boss, by all accounts. Mr. McGinty, you may have to answer for your own conduct some of these days. The captain answered this man. McMurdo was a crook before ever he came here, and his costs a crook still cover him patrolman, while I disarm him. There's my pistol, said McMurdo coolly. Maybe Captain Marvin, if you and I were alone, and face to face, he would not take me so easily. Where's your warrant? Costs asked McGinty. By God, a man might as well live in Russia is in Vermissa, while folk like you were running the police. It's a capitalist outrage, and you'll hear more of it. I reckon you do what you Costs think is your duty the best way you can. Counselor will look after ours. What am I accused of? Asked McMurdo. Of being concerned in the beating of old editor Stanger at the Herald office. It wasn't Costs your fault that it isn't a murder charge. Well, if that's all you have against him, cried McGinty with a laugh, you can save yourself a deal of trouble by dropping Costs it right now. This man was with me in my saloon, playing poker up to midnight, and I can bring a dozen to prove it. That's your affair. And I guess you can settle Costs it in court tomorrow. Meanwhile, come on, McMurdo, and come quietly. If you don't want a gun across your head, you stand wide. Mr. McGinty, for I warn you I will stand no resistance when I'm on duty, so Costs determined was the appearance of the captain that both McMurdo and his boss were forced to accept the situation. The latter managed to have a few whispered words with the prisoner before they parted. What about? He jerked his thumb, Costs upward to signify the coining plant. All right, whispered McMurdo, who had devised a safe hiding place under the floor. I'll bid you goodbye, said the boss, shaking hands. I'll see Riley the lawyer and take Costs the defense upon myself. Take my word for it. Did they won't be able to hold you? I wouldn't bet on that. Go out the prisoner, you two, and shoot him if he tries any Costs games. "I'll search the house before I leave." He did so, but apparently found no trace of the concealed plant when he had descended. He and his men escorted McMurdo to headquarters. Darkness had costs fallen, and a keen blizzard was blowing so that the streets were nearly deserted, but a few loiterers followed the group, and emboldened by invisibility shouted imprecations at the prisoner. "Wench the curse. It's Kara, they. Costs ride lynch him." They laughed and jeered as he was pushed into the police station. After a short formal examination from the inspector in charge, he was put into the common cell. Here he found Baldwin, Costs, and 3 other criminals of the night before, all arrested that afternoon and waiting their trial next morning. But even within this inner fortress of the law, the long arm of the freemen was able Costs to extend late at night. There came a jailer with a straw bundle for their bedding, out of which he extracted 2 bottles of whiskey, some glasses, and a pack of cards. They spent a hilarious night without an Costs' anxious thought as to the ordeal of the morning, nor had they caused, as the result was to show the magistrate could not possibly on the evidence have held them for a higher court. On the one hand, Costs, the compositors and pressmen were forced to admit that the light was uncertain, that they were themselves much perturbed, and that it was difficult for them to swear to the identity of the assailants, although they believed that the accused Costs were among them. Cross-examined by the clever attorney who had been engaged by McGinty, they were even more nebulous in their evidence. The injured man had already deposed that he was so taken by surprise by the Costs' suddenness of the attack that he could state nothing beyond the fact that the first man who struck him wore a moustache. He added that he knew them to be Scowrer, as since no one else in the Costs community could possibly have any enmity to him, and he had long been threatened on account of his outspoken editorials. On the other hand, it was clearly shown by the united and unfaltering evidence of 6 citizens, including that high Costs municipal official Councillor McGinty, that the men had been at a card party at the Union House until an hour very much later than the commission of the outrage. Need to say that they were discharged with Costs something very near to an apology from the bench for the inconvenience to which they had been put, together with an implied censure of Captain Marvin and the police for their officious zeal. The verdict was greeted with loud applause. Costs by a court in which McMurdo saw many familiar faces. Brothers of the lodge smiled and waved, but there were others who sat with compressed lips and brooding eyes as the men filed out of Costs the dock. One of them, a little dark-bearded, resolute fellow, put the thoughts of himself and comrades into words as the ex-prisoners passed him. "You damned murderers," he said. "We'll fix you yet." Costs, Chapter 5. The darkest hour. If anything had been needed to give an impetus to Jack McMurdo's popularity among his fellows, it would have been his arrest and acquittal. That a man on the very Costs' night of joining the lodge should have done something which brought him before the magistrate was a new record in the annals of the society. Already he had earned the reputation of a good boon. Costs' companion, a cheery reveller, and withal a man of high temper, who would not take an insult even from the all-powerful boss himself, but in addition to this he impressed his comrades with the idea that, among them, Costs all, there was not one whose brain was so ready to devise a bloodthirsty scheme, or whose hand would be more capable of carrying it out. "He'll be the boy for the clean job," said the oldsters to one. Costs another, and waited their time until they could set him to his work. McGinty had instruments enough already, but he recognized that this was a supremely able one. He felt like a man holding a fierce bloodhound in leash. Costs their workers to do the smaller work, but someday he would this creature upon its prey. A few members of the lodge, Ted Baldwin among them, resented the rapid rise of the stranger and hated him for it, but they, Costs, kept clear of him, for he was as ready to fight as to laugh. But if he gained favor with his fellows, there was another quarter one, which had become even more vital to him, in which he lost it. Costs Etty Shaft, as father would have nothing more to do with him, nor would he allow him to enter the house. Eddie herself was too deeply in love to give him up altogether, and yet her own good sense. Costs warned her of what would come from a marriage with a man who was regarded as a criminal. One morning, after a sleepless night, she determined to see him, possibly for the last time, and make one strong. Costs' endeavor to draw him from those evil influences which were sucking him down. She went to his house, and she had often begged her to do, and made her way into the room which she used as his Costs' sitting room. He was seated at a table with his back turned, and a letter in front of him. A sudden spirit of girlish mischief came over her. She was still only 19. He had not heard her when Costs. She pushed open the door now. She tiptoed forward and laid her hand lightly upon his bended shoulders. If she had expected to startle him, she certainly succeeded, but only in turn to be startled herself. Costs, with a tiger spring, he turned on her, and his right hand was feeling for her throat. At the same instant, with the other hand he crumpled up the paper that lay before him. For an instant he stood. Costs, glaring, then astonishment and joy took the place of the ferocity which had convulsed his features, a ferocity which had sent her shrinking back in horror as from something which had never before intruded into her gentle life. "It's you, Costs," said he, mopping his brow, "and to think that you should come to me, heart of my heart, and I should find nothing better to do than to want to strangle you. Come, Costs then, darling," and he held out his arms. "Let me make it up to you." But she had not recovered from that sudden glimpse of guilty fear which she had read in the man's face all her Costs. Woman's instinct told her that it was not the mere fright of a man who is startled guilt. That was it, guilt and fear. "What's come over you, Jack?" she cried. "Costs, why were you so scared of me? Oh, Jack, if your conscience was at ease, you would not have looked at me like that. Sure, I was thinking of other things, and when you came tripping so lightly on Costs those fairy feet of yours. No, it was more than that, Jack." Then a sudden suspicion seized her. "Let me see that letter you were writing." Eddie, I couldn't do that." Her suspicions became Cost certainties. "It's to another woman," she cried. "I know it. Why else should you hold it from me? Was it to your wife that you were writing? How am I to know that you, Costs, are not a married man, you a stranger, that nobody knows I am not married at ICI? Now, I swear it, you're the only woman on earth to me, by the cross of Christ. I, Costs, swear it." He was so white with passionate earnestness that she could not but believe him fell. Then she cried, "Why will you not show me the letter?" "I'll tell you a kushla," said he. "I'm under oath not, Costs, to show it. And just as I wouldn't break my word to you, so I would keep it to those who hold my promise. It's the business of the lodge, and even to you, Costs, it's secret. And if I was scared when a hand fell on me, can't you understand it when it might have been the hand of a detective?" She felt that he was telling the truth. "Costs," she gathered her into his arms and kissed away her fears and doubts. "Sit here by me. Then it's a queer throne for such a queen, but it's the best your poor lover, Costs, can find you do better for you. Some of these days, I'm thinking now, your mind is easy once again, is it not? How can it ever be at ease, Jack, when I know that? Costs, you are a criminal among criminals. Then I never know the day that I may hear you are in court for murder, McMurdo the Scowrer. That's what one of our boarders called you yesterday. It went through my Costs' heart like an eye, sure hard words. Break no bones, but they were true. Well, dear, it's not so bad as you think we are, but poor men that are trying in our own way to get our rights. Costs." He threw her arms round her lover's neck. "Give it up, Jack, from high stake, for God's sake, give it up. It was to ask you that I came here today. Oh, Jack, see, I beg, Costs it of you on my bended knees, kneeling here before you, I implore you to give it up." He raised her and soothed her with her head against his breast. "Sure, my darling, you don't know what it is. Your Costs asking, how could I give it up when it would be to break my old and to desert my comrades? If you could see how things stand with me, you could never ask it of. Costs me. Besides, if I wanted to, how could I do it? You don't suppose the lodge would let a man go free with all its secrets? I've thought of that, Jack. I've planned it all. Costs. Father has saved some money. He's weary of this place where the fear of these people darkens our lives. He is ready to go. We could fly together to Philadelphia or New York, where we would be safe from them. Costs." McMurdo laughed. "Now the lodge has a long arm. Do you think it could not stretch from here to Philadelphia or New York? Well, then to the west, or to England, or to Germany. Her father came from anywhere, Costs, to get away from this valley of fear." McMurdo thought of old brother Morris. "Sure, it is the second time I've heard the valley so named," said he. "The shadow does indeed seem to lie heavy on some of Costs you. It darkens every moment of our lives. Do you suppose that Ted Baldwin has ever forgiven us, if it were not that he fears you? What do you suppose our chances, Costs, would be if you saw the look in those dark, hungry eyes of his when they fall on me? By God, I teach him better man, as if I caught him at it. But see here, Costs. Little girl, I can't leave here. I can't take that from me once and for all, but if you will leave me to find my own way, I will try to prepare a way of Costs getting honorably out of it. There is no honor in such a matter. Well, it's just how you look at it, but if you'll give me 6 months, I'll work it, so that costs. I can leave without being ashamed to look others in the face. The girl laughed with joy. 6 months, she cried. Is it a promise? Well, it may be 7 or 8, but within a year at the furthest costs will leave the valley behind us. It was the most that Etty could obtain, and yet it was something. There was this distant light to illuminate the gloom of the immediate future. She returned to her Cost's father's house more light-hearted than she had ever been since Jack McMurdo had come into her life. It might be thought that as a member all the doings of the society would be told to him, but he was Cost soon to discover that the organization was wider and more complex than the simple lodge. Even Boss McGinty was ignorant as to many things, for there was an official named the county delegate living at Hobson's Patch farther down. Cost's the line who had power over several different lodges, which he wielded in a sudden and arbitrary way. Only once did McMurdo see him, a sly little grey-haired rat of a man with a slinking gait, and a Cost's sidelong glance which was charged with malice. Evans, Pot was his name, and even the great boss of the Missa felt towards him something of the repulsion and fear which the huge Danton may have felt for Cost's the puny but dangerous Robespierre. One day Scanlon, who was McMurdo's fellow boarder, received a note from McGinty enclosing one from Evans Pot, which informed him that he was sending over 2 good men, Lawler and Costs. Andrews, who had instructions to act in the neighborhood, though it was best for the cause that no particulars asked to their objects should be given, would the bodymaster see to it that suitable arrangements be Costs made for their lodgings and comfort. Until the time for action should arrive, McGinty added that it was impossible for anyone to remain secret at the Union House, and that therefore he would be Costs obliged if McMurdo and Scanlon would put the strangers up for a few days in their boarding house. The same evening the 2 men arrived, each carrying his gripsack. Lawler was an elderly man. Costs, shrewd, silent and self-contained, clad in an old black frock coat, which, with his soft felt hat and ragged, grizzled beard, gave him a general resemblance to an itinerant preacher. His companion, Andrews. Costs was little more than a boy, frank-faced and cheerful, with the breezy manner of one who is out for a holiday and means to enjoy every minute of it. Both men were total abstainers and behaved in all Cost's ways as exemplary members of the society, with the one simple exception that they were assassins, who would often prove themselves to be most capable instruments for this association of murder. Lawler had already carried out 14 Cost's commissions of the kind, and Andrews 3. They were, as McMurdo found, quite ready to converse about their deeds in the past, which they recounted with the half-bashful pride of men who had done Cost's good and unselfish service for the community. They were reticent, however, as to the immediate job in hand. They chose us, because neither I nor the boy here drink law. Explained they can count on us. Costs saying no more than we should. You must not take it amiss, but it is the orders of the county delegate that we obey. Sure, we're all in it together, said Scanlon, McMurdo's mate, and as the force had to. Costs, gather at supper. That's true enough, and we'll talk till the cows come home of the killing of Charlie Williams or of Simon Bird or any other job in the past. But till the work is done we say nothing. Costs, there are 6 about here that I have a word to say to, said McMurdo with an oath. I suppose it isn't Jack Knox of Ironhill that you're after. That goes. Costs some way to see him get his deserts. No, it's not him yet, or Herman Strauss. No, nor him either. Well, if you won't tell us, we can't make you, but I'd be glad to know. Lawler. Costs smiled and shook his head. He was not to be drawn. In spite of the reticence of their guests, Scanlon and McMurdo were quite determined to be present at what they called the fun, when therefore at an Cost's early hour. One morning McMurdo heard them creeping down the stairs. He awakened Scanlon, and the 2 hurried on their clothes. When they were dressed they found that the others had stolen out, leaving the door open behind them. It, Costs, was not yet dawn, and by the light of the lamps they could see the 2 men some distance down the street. They followed them warily, treading noiselessly. In the deep snow the boarding house was near the Cost's edge of the town, and soon they were at the crossroads, which is beyond its boundary. Here 3 men were waiting, with whom Lawler and Andrews held a short, eager conversation. Then they all moved on together. Costs. It was clearly some notable job which needed numbers at this point. There are several trails which lead to various mines. The strangers took that, which led to the Crow Hill, a huge business, which costs was in strong hands, which had been able, thanks to their energetic and fearless New England manager Josiah H. Dunn, to keep some order and discipline during the long reign of Terror Day was costs breaking now, and a line of workmen were slowly making their way singly and in groups along the blackened path. McMurdo and Scanlon strolled on with the others, keeping in sight of the men whom they costs followed. A thick mist lay over them from the heart of it. There came the sudden scream of a steam whistle. It was the 10-minute signal before the cages descended and the day's labor began. When costs they reached the open space round the mine shaft, there were 100 miners waiting, stamping their feet and blowing on their fingers, for it was bitterly cold. The strangers stood in a little group under the shadow of the engine costs. How Scanlon and McMurdo climbed a heap of slag, from which the whole scene lay before them. They saw the mine engineer, a great bearded Scotsman named Minnies, come out of the engine house and blow his costs whistle for the cages to be lowered at the same instant. A tall, loose-framed young man with a clean-shaved, earnest face advanced eagerly towards the pit head. As he came forward, his eyes fell costs upon the group, silent and motionless under the engine house. The men had drawn down their hats and turned up their collars to screen their faces. For a moment, the presentiment of death laid its costs cold hand upon the manager's heart. At the next he had shaken it off, and saw only his duty towards intrusive strangers. "Who are you?" he asked, as he advanced. "What are you loitering there?" Costs, for there was no answer, but the lad Andrews stepped forward and shot him in the stomach. The 100 waiting miners stood as motionless and helpless as if they were paralyzed. The manager clapped costs his 2 hands to the wound and doubled himself up. Then he staggered away, but another of the assassins fired, and he went down sidewise, kicking and chlorine among a heap of clinkers. "Ming is the costs." Scotchman gave a roar of rage at the sight and rushed with an iron spanner at the murderers, but was met by 2 balls in the face which dropped him dead at their very feet. There was a surge costs forward of some of the miners and an inarticulate cry of pity and of anger, but a couple of the stranger emptied their 6-shooters over the heads of the crowd, and they broke and scattered, some of them rushing wildly costs back to their homes in Vermissa. When a few of the bravest had rallied and there was a return to the mine, the murderous gang had vanished in the mists of the morning without a single witness being costable to swear to the identity of these men who, in front of 100 spectators, had wrought this double crime. Scanlon and McMurdo made their way back, Scanlon somewhat subdued, for it was the cost's first murder job that he had seen with his own eyes, and it appeared less funny than he had been led to believe. The horrible screams of the dead manager's wife pursued him as they hurried to the cost's town. McMurdo was absorbed and silent, but he showed no sympathy for the weakening of his companion. "Sure, it is like a war," he repeated. "What is it but a war between costs us and them, and we hit back where we best?" And there was high rebel in the lodge room at the Union House that night, not only over the killing of the manager, costs an engineer of the Crow Hill mine, which would bring this organization into line with the other blackmailed and terror-stricken companies of the district, but also over a distant triumph which had costs been wrought by the hands of the lodge itself. It would appear that when the county delegate had sent over 5 good men to strike a blow in Vermissa, he had demanded that, in return, 3 Vermissa costsmen should be secretly selected and sent across to kill William Hales of Stake Royal, one of the best known and most popular mine owners in the Gilmerton district, a man who was believed not to costs have an enemy in the world, for he was in all ways a model employer. He had insisted, however, upon efficiency in the work, and had therefore paid off certain drunken and idle employees who were costs. Members of the all-powerful society coughing notices hung outside his door had not weakened his resolution, and so in a free civilized country he found himself condemned to death. The execution had now been duly carried out. Ted Costs Baldwin, who sprawled now in the seat of honor beside the bodymaster, had been chief of the party. His flushed face and glazed bloodshot eyes told of sleeplessness and drink. He and his 2 Costs comrades had spent the night before among the mountains. They were unkempt and weather-stained, but no heroes returning from a forlorn hope could have had a warmer welcome from their comrades. The story was told, costs, and retold amid cries of delight and shouts of laughter. They had waited for their man as he drove home at nightfall, taking their station at the top of a steep hill where his horse must be at a cost's walk. He was so furred to keep out the cold that he could not lay his hand on his pistol. They had pulled him out and shot him again. And again he had screamed, "Costs for mercy." The screams were repeated for the amusement of the lodge. Let's hear again how he squealed. They cried, none of them knew the man, but there is eternal drama in a killing, and costs. They had shown the Scowrers of Gilmerton that the Vermissa man were to be relied upon there, had been one contra Tom for a man, and his wife had driven up, while they were still emptying their revolvers, costs into the silent body. It had been suggested that they should shoot them both, but they were harmless folk who were not connected with the mines, so they were sternly bidden to drive on and costs keep silent, lest a worse thing before them, and so the blood-mottled figure had been left as a warning to all such hard-hearted employers, and the three noble avengers had hurried off into the mountains where unbroken nature comes. Costs down to the very edge of the furnaces. The slag heaps here, they were safe and sound, their work well done, and the plaudits of their companions in their ears. It had been a great day for the Scowrers. Costs the shadow had fallen even darker over the valley, but as the wise general chooses the moment of victory in which to redouble his efforts so that his foes may have no time to steady themselves. Costs after disaster. So Boss McGinty, looking out upon the scene of his operations with his brooding and malicious eyes, had devised a new attack upon those who opposed him. That very night, as the half-drunken company broke up, he touched Costs McMurdo on the arm and led him aside into that inner room where they had their first interview. "See here, my lad," said he, "I've got a job. It's worthy of you. At last you'll have the doing of it. Costs in your own hands, proud." "I am to hear it," McMurdo answered. "You can take 2 men with you, Manders and Riley. They have been warned for service. Will never be right in this district until Costs Chester Wilcox has been settled, and you'll have the thanks of every lodge in the coalfields if you can down him. I'll do my best anyhow. Who is he? And Westlaw find him." McGinty took his eternal Costs half-chewed, half-smoked cigar from the corner of his mouth and proceeded to draw a rough diagram on a page torn from his notebook. "He's the chief foreman of the Iron Dike Company. He's a hard-cost citizen and old collar sergeant of the war. Oh, scars and grizzle. We've had 2 tries at him, but had no luck, and Jim Carnaway lost his life over it. Now it's for you, Costs, to take it over. That's the house all alone at the Iron Dike crossroad. Same as you see here on the map, without another within earshot, and it's no goodbye day. He's armed and shoots quick and straight. Costs, with no questions asked, but at night, well, there he is, with his wife, 3 children, and a hired help. You pick and choose. It's all or none if you could get a bag of blasting powder at. Costs the front door with a slow match to it. What's the mountain? Didn't I tell you he shot Jim Carnaway? Why did he shoot him? What in thunder has that to do with you? Costs Carnaway was about his house at night, and he shot him. That's enough for me and you. You've got to settle the thing. Right. There's these 2 women and the children. Costs. Do they go up too? They have to house. How can we get him? It seems hard on them, for they've done nothing. What sort of fool's talk is this? Do you back out easy? Costs Counselor. Easy, what have I ever said or done that you should think I would be, after standing back from an order of the bodymaster of my own lodge? If it's Costs right or if it's wrong, it's for you to decide. You'll do it. Then, of course, I will do it, when, well, you'd best give me a night or 2 that I may see the house. Costs, and make my plans then very good, said McGinty, shaking him by the hand. I leave it with you. It will be a great day when you bring us the news. It's just the last stroke that Costs will bring them all to their knees. McMurdo thought long and deeply over the commission, which had been so suddenly placed in his hands. The isolated house in which Chester Wilcox lived was about Costs 5 miles off in an adjacent valley. That very night he started off all alone to prepare for the attempt. It was daylight before he returned from his reconnaissance. Next day he interviewed his 2 subordinates, Manders and Riley, Costs' reckless youngsters who were as elated as if it were a deer hunt. 2 nights later they met outside the town, all 3 armed, and one of them carrying a sack stuffed with the powder which was Costs used in the quarries. It was 2 OLE in the morning before they came to the lonely house. The night was a windy one, with broken clouds drifting swiftly across the face of a three-quarter moon. They, Costs, had been warned to be on their guard against bloodhounds, so they moved forward cautiously with their pistols cocked in their hands, but there was no sound, save the howling of the wind, and no movement, but the Costs swaying branches above them. McMurdo listened at the door of the lonely house, but all was still within. Then he leaned the powder back against it, ripped a hole in it with his knife, and attached the Costs' fuse when it was well alight. He and his two companions took to their heels, and were some distance off, safe and snug in a sheltering ditch before the shattering roar of the explosion with the low deep Costs' rumble of the collapsing building told them that their work was done. No cleaner job had ever been carried out in the blood-stained annals of the society, but alas, that work so well organized, and Costs boldly carried out, should all have gone for nothing. Warned by the fate of the various victims and knowing that he was marked down for destruction, Chester Wilcox had moved himself and his family, Costs only the day before, to some safer and less known quarters, where a guard of police should watch over them. It was an empty house which had been torn down by the gunpowder and the grim old colour. Cost Sergeant of the War was still teaching discipline to the of Iron Dyke. "Leave him to me," said McMurdo. "He's my man, and I'll get him sure if I have to wait a year for." Costs him a vote of thanks, and confidence was passed in full lodge, and so for the time the matter ended, when a few weeks later it was reported in the papers that Wilcox had been shot out from an Costs ambuscade. It was an open secret that McMurdo was still at work upon his unfinished job. Such were the methods of the Society of Freemen, and such were the deeds of the Scowrers by which they Costs spread their rule of fear over the great and rich district, which was for so long a period haunted by their terrible presence. Why should these pages be stained by further crimes? Costs. Have I not said enough to show the men and their methods? These deeds are written in history, and there are records wherein one may read the details of them there. One may learn of the shooting of Costs' policemen Hunt and Evans because they ventured to arrest two members of the society, a double outrage planned at the Vermissa Lodge, and carried out in cold blood upon two helpless and disarmed men. Costs there. Also one may read of the shooting of Mrs. Lobby when she was nursing her husband, who had been beaten almost to death by orders of Boss McGinty, the killing of the elder Jenkins shortly. Costs, followed by that of his brother, the mutilation of James Murdoch, the blowing up of the Staphouse family, and the murder of Distend Doles, all followed hard upon one another in the same terrible winter. Darkly the shadow lay. Costs upon the Valley of Fear. The spring had come with running brooks and blossoming trees. There was hope for all nature bound so long in an iron grip, but nowhere was there any hope for the men. Costs and women who lived under the yoke of the terror. Never had the cloud above them been so dark and hopeless as in the early summer of the year 1875. Chapter 6. Costs' danger. It was the height of the reign of terror. McMurdo, who had already been appointed in a deacon, with every prospect of someday succeeding McGinty, as bodymaster, was now so necessary to the counsels of his Costs comrades that nothing was done without his help and advice. The more popular he became, however, with the freemen the blacker, were the scowls which greeted him as he passed along the streets of Vermissa. Costs, in spite of their terror, the citizens were taking heart to band themselves together against their oppressors. Rumours had reached the lodge of secret gatherings in the Herald office, and of distribution of firearms among the Costs, law-abiding people, but McGinty and his men were undisturbed by such reports. They were numerous, resolute, and well-armed. Their opponents were scattered and powerless. It would all end, as it had done in the past, in aimless Costs talk, and possibly in impotent arrests. So said McGinty, McMurdo, and all the bolder spirit. It was a Saturday evening in May. Saturday was always the lodge night, and McMurdo was leaving his house to attend Costs it, when Morris, the weaker brother of the order, came to see him. His brow was creased with care, and his kindly face was drawn. "And haggard, can I speak with you freely, Mr. McMurdo?" "Sure I can't." Costs, forget that I spoke my hearty once, and that you kept it to yourself, even though the boss himself came to ask you about it. What else could I do if you Costs trusted me? It wasn't that I agreed with what you said, I know that well, but you were the one that I can speak to, and be safe of a secret here. He put his hand to Costs his breast, and it is just burning the life out of me. I wish it had come to any one of you but me. If I tell it, it will mean murder for sure. If I don't, it may. Costs, bring the end of us all. God help me, but I'm near out of my wits over it. McMurdo looked at the man earnestly. He was trembling in every limb. He poured some Cost's whiskey into a glass and handed it to him. That's the physic for the likes of you, said he. Now let me hear of it. Morris drank, and his white face took a tinge of Cost's colour. I can tell it to you all in one sentence, said he. There's a detective on our trail. McMurdo stared at him in astonishment. Why, man, you're crazy, he said. Isn't a place full of police and detectives? And Costs, what harm did they ever to us? No, it's no man of the district, as you say. We know them. And it is little did they can do, but you've heard of Pinkertons. I've read of some folk of Costs that name. Well, you can take it from me. You've now show when they're on your trail. It's not a take it or miss it government concern. It's a dead earnest business proposition, this alpha results. Costs then keeps out till by hook or crook it gets them. If a Pinkerton man is deep in this business, we're all destroyed. We must kill him now. It's the first thought. Costs that came to you, so it will be up at the launch. Didn't I say to you that it would end in murder? Sure, what is murder? Isn't it common enough in these Costs parts? It is indeed, but it's not for me to point out the man that is to be murdered. I'd never rest easy again, and yet it's our own necks that may be at Costs' stake. And God's name, what shall I do? He rocked to and fro in his agony of indecision, but his words had moved McMurdo deeply. It was easy to see that he shared the other's opinion as to the Costs danger, and the need for meeting it. He gripped Morris's shoulder and shook him in his earnestness. See here, man, he cried, and he almost screeched the words in his excitement. He won't gain anything by Costs sitting, keening like an old wife. At a wake, let's have the facts. Who is the fellow? Where is he? How did you hear of him? Why did you come to me? I came to you. Costs, for you were the one man that would advise me. I told you that I had a store in the East before I came here. I left good friends behind me, and one of them, Costs, is in the telegraph service. He has a letter that I had from him yesterday. It's this part from the top of the page. You can read it yourself. This was what McMurdo read, how the Scowrers getting on. Costs. In your parts, we read plenty of them in the papers between you and me. I expect to hear news from you before long. 5 corporations and the 2 railroads have taken the thing up in dead earnest. They, Costs, mean it. And you can bet they'll get there. They are right deep down into it. Pinkerton has taken hold under their orders, and his best man, Birdie Edwards, is operating. The thing has got to be Costs stopped right now. Now read the postscript, of course. What I give you is what I learned in business, so it goes no further. It's a queer cipher that you handled by the yard every day, and can get no costs. Meaning from McMurdo sat in silence for some time with the letter in his listless hands. The mist had lifted for a moment, and there was the abyss before him. Does anyone else know of this? He, Costs, asked. I have told no one else but this man, your friend. Has he any other person that he would be likely to write to? Well, I dare say he knows 1 or 2 more of Costs the lodge. It's likely enough I was asking because it is likely that he may have given some description of this fellow Birdie Edwards. Then we could get on his trail. Well, it's possible, but I, Costs, should not think he knew him. He's just telling me the news that came to him by way of business. How would he know this Pinkerton man? McMurdo gave a violent start. By Gah, he cried. I've got him. What? Costs a fool. I was not to know it, Lord, but we're in luck. We will fix him before he can do any harm. See here, Morris, will you leave this thing in my hands? Sure, if you. Costs will only take it off mine. I'll do that. You can stand right back and let me run it. Even your name need not be mentioned. I'll take it all on myself as if it were. Costs to me that this letter has come. Will that content you? It's just what I would ask. Then leave it at that, and keep your head shot. Now I'll get down to the lodge. Costs, and will soon make old man Pinkerton sorry for himself. He wouldn't kill this man. The less you know, friend Morris, the easier your conscience will be, and the better you'll sleep. Ask no questions, and Costs, that these things settled themselves. I have hold of it now. Morris shook his head sadly as he left. I feel that his blood is on my hands, he groaned. Self-protection is no murder. Anyhow, said McMurdo, smiling grimly. Costs, that's him or us. I guess this man would destroy us all. And if we left him long in the valley, why, Brother Morris will have to elect you bodymaster yet, for you surely saved Costs the lodge. and yet it was clear from his actions that he thought more seriously of this new intrusion than his words would show. It may have been his guilty conscience. It may have been the Cost's reputation of the Pinkerton organization. It may have been the knowledge that great, rich corporations had set themselves the task of clearing out the Scowrers. But whatever his reason, his actions were those of a man who is. Cost's preparing for the worst. Every paper which would incriminate him was destroyed before he left a house. After that he gave a long sigh of satisfaction, for it seemed to him that he was safe, and yet the danger must. Costs still have pressed somewhat upon him, for on his way to the lodge he stopped at Old Man Shaft, as the house was forbidden him, but when he tapped at the window, Etty came out to him, the dancing Irish. Costs. Deviltry had gone from her lover's eyes. She read his danger in his earnest face. "Something has happened," she cried. "Oh, Jack, you are in danger. Sure, it's not very bad, my sweetheart. And yet, Costs. It may be wise that we make a move before it is worse. Make a move. I promised you once that I would go. Someday I think the time is coming. I have news tonight. Bad news, and I see. Costs trouble coming the police well. A Pinkerton. But sure you wouldn't know what that is, a Kuchler, nor what it may mean to the likes of me, until deep in this thing, and I may have Costs to get out of it quick." He said, "You would come with me if I went. Well, Jack, it would be the saving of you. I'm an honest man in something, Zetty. I wouldn't hurt a hair of your bonny Costs' head for all that the world can give, nor ever pull you down 1 inch from the golden throne above the clouds, where I always see you. Would you trust me?" She put her hand in his without Cost's word. "Well, then listen to what I say and do. Was I order you for, indeed it's the only way for us. Things are going to happen in this valley. I feel it in my Cost's bones. There may be many of us that will have to look out for ourselves. I'm one anyhow if I go by day or night. It's you that must come with me, but come after. Costs you, Jack. No, you shall come with me. If this valley is close to me, and I can never come back, how can I leave you behind, and me perhaps in hiding from the Costs police, with never a chance of a message? It's with me you must come. I know a good woman in the place I come from, and it's there. I'd leave you till we can get. Costs. Married, will you come? Yes, Jack, I will come. God bless you for your trust in me. It's a fiend out of hell that I should be if I abused it. Now, mark Yeti it will. Costs be just a word to you, and when it reaches you, you will drop everything and come right down to the waiting room at the depot and stay there till I come for. Costs you. Day or night, I come out the words. Jack, somewhat eased in mind, now that his own preparations for escape had been begun, McMurdo went on to the lodge it had already assembled, and only by Costs' complicated signs and countersigns could he pass through the outer guard and inner guard who close-tiled it. A buzz of pleasure and welcome greeted him as he entered the long room, was crowded, and Costs through the haze of tobacco smoke he saw the tangled black mane of the bodymaster, the cruel unfriendly features, a Baldwin the vulture face of Hera, Way the secretary, and a dozen more who were Costs among the leaders of the lodge. He rejoiced that they should all be there to take counsel over his news. "Indeed it's glad we are to see you, brother," cried the chairman. "There's business here. Costs that wants a Solomon in judgment to set it right. It's Lander and Egan," explained his neighbor as he took his seat. They both claimed the head money given by the lodge for the shooting of Old Man Crab. Costs over at Stylestown. And who's to say which fired the bullet? McMurdo rose in his place and raised his hand. The expression of his face froze the attention of the audience. There was a dead hush of expectation. "Costs eminent bodymaster," he said in a solemn voice. "I claim urgency, brother." "McMurdo claims urgency," said McGinty. "It's a claim that by the rules of this lodge takes precedence. Now, brother, we attend you." Costs. McMurdo took the letter from his pocket. "Eminent bodymaster and brethren," he said, "I am the bearer of ill news this day. But it is better that it should be known and discussed then that a blow should fall. Costs upon us without warning, which will destroy us all. I have information that the most powerful and richest organizations in this state have bound themselves together for our destruction, and that at this very moment there is a Costs. Pinkerton detective, one Birdie Edwards at work in the valley, collecting the evidence which may put a rope round the necks of many of us and send every man in this room and to a felon's cell. That Costs is the situation for the discussion of which I have made a claim of urgency. There was a dead silence in the room. It was broken by the chairman. "What is your evidence for this, Brother McMurdo?" he, Costs, asked. "And as in this latter of which has come into my hands," said McMurdo. He read the passage aloud. "That is a matter of honor with me, that I can give no further particulars about. Costs the letter, nor put it into your hands, but I assure you that there is nothing else in it which can affect the interests of the lodge. I put the case before you, as it has reached me, let me." Costs. "Say, Mr. Chairman," said one of the older brethren, "that I have heard of Bertie Edwards, and that he has the name of being the best man in the Pinkerton service. Does anyone know him by sight?" Costs asked McGinty. "Yes," said McMurdo, "I do." There was a murmur of astonishment through the hall. "I believe we hold him in the hollow of our hands," he continued with an exulting smile upon his face. "If, Costs, we act quickly and wisely, we can cut this thing short. If I have your confidence in your help, it is little did we have to fear. What have we to fear? Anyhow, what Costs? Can we know of our affairs, you might say so, if all we're as staunch as you can, sir. But this man has all the millions of the capitalists at his back, do you think? Costs. There is no weaker brother among all our lodges that could not be bought. He will get at our secrets. Maybe he's got them already. There's only one sure cure, that he never leaves the valley," said Baldwin. Costs. McMurdo nodded. "Good for you, Brother Baldwin," he said. "You and I have had our differences, but he have said the true word tonight. Where is he? Then, where shall we know him, eminent bodymaster?" Costs, said McMurdo earnestly, "I would put it to you that this is too vital a thing for us to discuss in open lodge. God forbid that I should throw a doubt on anyone." Costs here. "But if so much as a word of gossip got to the ears of this man, there would be an end of any chance of our getting him. I would ask the lodge to choose a trusty committee, Mr. Cost Chairman yourself, if I might suggest it, and Brother Baldwin here, and 5 more, then I can talk freely of what I know and of what I advise should be done." The proposition was at once adopted, and a committee, Costs, chosen. Besides the chairman and Baldwin, there were the vulture-faced Secretary Haraway, Tiger Cormac, the brutal young assassin, Carted the treasurer, and the brothers Willoughby, fearless and desperate men who would stick at nothing. Costs. The usual revelry of the lodge was short and subdued, for there was a cloud upon the men's spirit, and many there for the first time began to see the cloud of avenging law drifting up in that serene Kostski, under which they had dwelt so long. The horrors they had dealt out to others had been so much a part of their settled lives that the thought of retribution had become a remote one, and so seemed Costs, the more startling now that it came so closely upon them. They broke up early and left their leaders to their counsel. "Now, McMurdo," said McGinty when they were alone, "the 7 men start frozen in their Costs. I said just now that I knew Bertie Edwards," McMurdo explained. "I need not tell you that he is not here under that name. He's a brave man, but not a crazy one. He passes under the name of Steve Costs Wilson, and he's lodging at Hobson's Patch. How do you know this?" "Because I fell in to talk with him. I thought little of it at the time, nor would have given it a second thought, but for this Costs' letter. And now I'm sure it's the man. I met him on the cars when I went down the line on Wednesday. A hard case, if ever there was one. He said he was a reporter." Costs, I believed it, for the moment wanted to know all he could about Discovers and what he called the outrages for a New York paper. Ask me every kind of question, so as to get something, you bet I was. Costs. "Giving nothing away, I'd pay for it, and pay well," said he. "If I could get some stuff that would suit my editor." I said what I thought would please him best, and Costs. "She handed me a $20 bill for my information. "There's 10 times that for you," said he. "If you can find me all that I want, why did you tell him that any Costs stuff I could make up? How do you know he wasn't a newspaper man? I'll tell you he could out at Hobson's Patch. I'm sold to die. I chanced into the Telegraph Bureau." Costs. "And he was leaving it." "See here," said the operator after he'd gone out. "I guess we should charge double rates for this." "I guess you should," said I. He had filled the form with stuff that might have been Costs. "Chinese for all week he could make of it. He fires a sheet of this off every day," said to Clark. "Yes," said I. "It's special news for his paper, and he's scared. Did the Costs other should tap it." That was what the operator thought, and what I thought at the time. That I think differently now, by gar. "I believe you're right," said McGinty. "But what do you allow that we should Costs do about it? Why not go right down now and fix him?" someone suggested. I "The sooner the better. I'd start this next minute, if I knew where we could find him," said McMurdo. "Costs. He's in Hobson's Patch, but I don't know the house. I've got a plan though, if you'll only take my advice." "Well, what is it?" "I'll go to the patch tomorrow morning. I'll find him through the operator." "He, Costs, can locate him, I guess." "Well then I'll tell him that I'm a free man myself. I'll offer him all the secrets of the lodge for a price he bet it'll tumble to it." "Costs. I'll tell him that the papers are at my house and that it's as much as my life would be worth. Let him come wild folk were about. You'll see that that's horse sense." "Costs. Let him come at 10 o'clock at night, and he shall see everything that will fetch him sure. Well, you can pound the rest for yourself, Widow McNamara's, his lonely house cheese, as true as steel and at Costs deaf as a post. There's only Scanlon and me in the house if I get his promise, and I'll let you know if I do. I'd have the whole 7 of you come to Costs me by 9 o'clock. Well, get him in if he ever gets out alive. Well, he can talk of Birdie Edwards his luck for the rest of his days. There's going to be a vacancy. Costs at Pinkerton's, or I'm mistaken, leave it at that. McMurdo at 9:00 tomorrow night. We'll be with you. You once get the door shut behind him, and you can leave the rest with us." Chapter 7. The Trapping of Costs. Birdie Edwards, as McMurdo had said, the house in which he lived was a lonely one, very well suited for such a crime as they had planned. It was on the extreme fringe of the town, and stood well back. Costs from the road. In any other case, the conspirators would have simply called out their man as they had many a time before, and emptied their pistols into his body. But in this instance it was Costs very necessary to find out how much he knew, how he knew it, and what had been passed on to his employers. It was possible that they were already too late, and that the work had been done, if that. Costs was indeed, so they could at least have their revenge upon the man who had done it, but they were hopeful that nothing of great importance had yet come to the detective's knowledge, as otherwise they, Costs argued, he would not have troubled to write down and forward such trivial information as McMurdo claimed to have given him. However, all this they would learn from his own lips. Once in their Costs' power, they would find a way to make him speak. It was not the first time that they had handled an unwilling witness. McMurdo went to Hobson's Patch, as agreed. The police seemed to take Costs' particular interest in him that morning, and Captain Marvin, he who had claimed the old acquaintance with him at Chicago, actually addressed him as he waited at the station. McMurdo turned away, and Costs refused to speak with him. He was back from his mission in the afternoon, and saw McGinty at the Union House. "He is calming," he said. "Good," said McGinty. The giant was in his shirt sleeves, with Costs' chains and seals gleaming athwart his ample waistcoat, and a diamond twinkling through the fringe of his bristling beard. Drink and politics had made the boss a very rich, as well as powerful man. The more terrible therefore seemed that Costs' glimpse of the prison, or the gallows which had risen before him the night before. "Do you reckon he knows much?" he asked anxiously. McMurdo shook his head gloomily. "He's been here some time, 6 weeks at the Costs least. I guess he didn't come into these parts to look at the prospect, if he has been working among us all that time with the railroad money at his back. I should Costs expect that he has got results and that he has passed them on. There's not a weak man in the lodge," cried McGinty. "True as steel every man of them, and yet by the Costs, Lord, there is that skunk. Morris, what about him? If any man gives us away, it would be he. I've a mind to send a couple of the boys round before evening to give him a Costs beating up, and see what they can get from him." "Well, there would be no harm in that," McMurdo answered. "I won't deny that I have a liking for Morris, and would be Costs sorry to see him come to harm. He's spoken to me once or twice over large matters, and though he may not see them the same as you or I, he never seemed the sort." Costs squeals, "But still, and is not for me to stand between him and you." "I'll fix the old devil," said McGinty. "With an oath I've had my eye on him this year. Past well, you know best about that, McMurdo." Costs answered, "But whatever you do must be tomorrow, for we must lie low until the Pinkerton affair is settled up. We can't afford to set the police buzzing today. Of all days true for you," said McGinty. Costs. "And we'll learn from Birdie Edwards himself where he got his news if we have to cut his heart out first. Did he seem to send a trap?" McMurdo laughed. "I guess I took him on his weak Costs point. He said if he could get on a good trail of the Scowrers, he's ready to follow it into hell. I took his money." McMurdo grinned as he produced a wad of Costs dollar notes and as much more when he has seen all my papers. What papers? Well, there are no papers, but I filled him up about constitutions and books of rules and forms of membership. He expects to. Costs. Get right down to the end of everything before he leaves Faith. He's right there, said McGinty grimly. Didn't he ask you why you didn't bring him the papers, as if I would carry such things for me, a cost-spected man and Captain Marvin, after speaking to me this very day at the depot? I heard of that, said McGinty. I guess the heavy end of this business is coming on to you. We could put him down. Costs an old shaft when we've done with him. Good, however we work it. We can't get past the man living at Hobson's Patch and you being there today. McMurdo shrugged his shoulders. If we Costs handle it right, they can never prove the killing, said he. No one can see him come to the house after dark, and I'll lay to it that no one will see him go. Now see, Costs here. Counselor, I'll show you my plan, and I'll ask you to fit the others into it. You will all come in good time. Very well, he comes at 10 Scowrers. He's to tap. Costs 3 times and me to open the door for him. Then I'll get behind him and shut it. He's our man. Then that's all easy and plain. Yes, but the next step. Once considering he's a hard proposition, he's heavily Costs armed. I fooled him proper, and yet he's likely to be on his guard. Suppose I show him right into a room with 7 men in it, where he expected to find me alone. Costs. There is going to be shooting, and somebody is going to be hurt. That's so, and the noise is going to bring every damn copper in the township on top of it. I guess you're right. This is how I Costs should work it. You will all be in the big room, same as you saw when you had a chat with me. I'll open the door for him, show him into the parlor beside the door. Costs. And leave him there while I get the papers that will give me the chance of telling you how things are shaping. Then I will go back to him with some fate. Costs papers as he is reading them. I will jump for him and get my grip on his pistol arm. You'll hear me call, and in you will rush. The quicker the better, for he is as Costs strong a man as I, and I may have more than I can manage, but I allowed that I can hold him till you come. It's a good plan, said McGinty. The Large will owe you. Costs a debt for this. I guess when I move out of the chair, I can put a name to the man that's coming after me. Sure, Counselor, I'm little more than a recruit, said Costs McMurdo, but his face showed what he thought of the great man's compliment. When he had returned home, he made his own preparations for the grim evening in front of him. First he cleaned, oiled, and Costs loaded his Smith Wesson revolver. Then he surveyed the room in which the detective was to be trapped. It was a large apartment with a long deal table in the center and a big stove at one. Costs sighed. But each of these other sides were windows. There were no shutters on these, only light curtains which drew across. McMurdo examined these attentively. No doubt it must have struck him that the Costs' apartment was very exposed for so secret a meeting, yet its distance from the road made it of less consequence. Finally, he discussed the matter with his fellow lodger Scanlon. Though a Scowrer was an Costs' inoffensive little man who was too weak to stand against the opinion of his comrades, but was secretly horrified by the deeds of blood, at which he had sometimes been forced to assist McMurdo. Costs told him shortly what was intended. Now if I were you, Mike Scanlon, I would take a night off and keep clear of it. There will be bloody work here before morning. Well, indeed then, Mac Scanlon answered. Costs, it's not the will that the nerve that is wanting in me when I saw Manager Dunn go down at the colliery yonder. It was just more than I could stand. I'm not made for. Costs it saying was you or McGinty. If the lodge will think none the worse of me, I'll just do as you advise and leave you to yourselves for the evening. The men came in good time as arranged there were. Costs outwardly respectable citizens, well clad and cleanly, but a judge of faces would have read little hope for Birdie Edwards in those hard mouths and remorseless eyes. There was not a man in the room. Costs whose hands had not been written a dozen times before they were as hardened to human murder as a butcher to sheep. Foremost, of course, both in appearance and in guilt, was the formidable boss Haraway. Costs. The secretary was a lean, bitter man with a long, scraggy neck and nervous, jerky limbs, a man of incorruptible fidelity where the finances of the order were concerned, and with no notion of justice, costs, or honesty to anyone beyond the treasurer Carter, was a middle-aged man with an impassive, rather sulky expression and a yellow parchment skin. He was a capable organizer, and the actual details of nearly every outrage. Costs had sprung from his plotting brain. The two Willoughbys were men of action, tall, live young fellows with determined faces, while their companion Tiger Cormac, a heavy, dark youth, was feared even by Costs, his own comrades, for the ferocity of his disposition. These were the men who assembled that night under the roof of McMurdo for the killing of the Pinkerton detective. Their hosts had placed whiskey, Costs, upon the table, and they had hastened to prime themselves for the work before them. Baldwin and Cormac were already half drunk, and the liquor had brought out all their ferocity. Cormac placed his, Costs' hands on the stove for an instant. It had been lighted, for the nights were still cold. "That will do," said he, with an oath. I said Baldwin, catching his meaning. "If Costs he is strapped to that, we will have the truth out of him. We'll have the truth out of him, never fear," said McMurdo. He had nerves of steel, this man, for though Costs, the whole weight of the affair was on him, his manner was as cool and unconcerned as ever. The others marked it and applauded. "You were the one to handle him," said the boss approvingly. "Not a warning, Costs. Will he get till your hand is on his throat? It's a pity there are no shutters to your windows." McMurdo went from one to the other and drew the curtains tighter. "Sure no one, Costs, can spy upon us now. It's closed upon the hour. Maybe he won't come. Maybe he'll get a sniff of danger," said the secretary. "He'll come, never fear," McMurdo answered. "Costs. He is as eager to come as you can be to see him hark to." That they all sat like wax figures, some with their glasses arrested halfway to their lips. 3 loud knocks had sounded at the door. "Hush, Costs." McMurdo raised his hand in caution. An exulting glance went round the circle, and hands were laid upon their weapons. "Not a sound for your lives," McMurdo whispered, as he went from the room, closing the door carefully behind Costs him. With strained ears, the murderers waited. They counted the steps of their comrade down the passage. Then they heard him open the outer door. There were a few words as of greeting. Then they were Costs, aware of a strange step inside and of an unfamiliar voice. An instant later came the slam of the door and the turn the key in the lock. Their prey was safe within the trap. Tiger Cormac laughed, Costs horribly, and Boss McGinty clapped his great hand across his mouth. "Be quiet, you fool," he whispered. "You'll be the undoing of us." Yet there was a mutter of conversation from the next room. It seemed interminable. Then the door, Costs, opened and McMurdo appeared, his finger upon his lip. He came to the end of the table and looked round at them. A subtle change had come over him. His manner was Costs, as of one who has great work to do. His face had set into granite firmness. His eyes shone with a fierce excitement. Behind his spectacles, he had become a visible leader of men. They stared at him, Costs, with eager interest, but he said nothing, still with the same singular gaze. He looked from man to man. "Well," cried Boss McGinty, at last, as he— "Here is Bertie Edwards here." "Yes," McMurdo answered slowly. "Costs. Bertie Edwards is here. I am. Bertie Edwards." There were 10 seconds after that brief speech, during which the room might have been empty. So profound was the silence, the hissing of a kettle upon the stove. Costs rose sharp and strident to the ear. 7 white faces, all turned upward to this man, who dominated them, was set motionless with utter terror. Then, with a sudden shivering of glass, a bristle of glistening rifle barrels broke through Costs' each window while the curtains were torn from their hangings. At the sight, Boss McGinty gave the roar of a wounded bear and plunged for the half-opened door. A leveled revolver met him there, with the Costs' stern blue eyes of Captain Marvin of the Mine Police gleaming behind Decites. The boss recoiled and fell back into his chair. "Safer there," Counselor, said the man whom they had known as McMurdo. "And you, Costs Baldwin, if you don't take your hand off your pistol, you'll cheat the hangman, yet pull it out. Oh, by the Lord that made me there will do there are 40 armed Costsmen around this house, and you can figure it out for yourself. What chance you have, take their pistols." Marvin. There was no possible resistance under the menace of those rifles. The men were disarmed, sulky, sheepish, and Costs amazed. They still sat round the table. "I'd like to say a word to you before we separate," said the man who would trap them. "I guess we may not meet again until Costs. You see me on the stand in the courthouse. I'll give you something to think over between now and then. You know me now for what I am at. Last, I can put my cards on the table. Costs. I'm Bertie Edwards of Pinkerton's. I was chosen to break up your gang. I had a hard and dangerous game to play. Not a soul, not one soul, not my nearest, and costs. Dearest knew that I was playing it. Only Captain Marvin here, and my employers knew that. But it's over tonight. Thank God, and I'm the winner. The 7 pale, rigid faces looked up at him. There was Cost's unappeasable hatred in their eyes. He read the relentless threat. Maybe you think that the game is not over yet. Well, I take my chance of that anyhow. Some of you will take no further hand, and there costs, say 60 more besides yourselves, that will see a jail this night. I'll tell you this, that when I was put upon this job, I never believed there was such a society as yours. Costs. I thought it was paper talk, and that I would prove it. So they told me it was to do with the free man. So I went to Chicago, and was made one then. I was sure, coster than ever, that it was just paper talk, or I found no harm in this society, but a deal of good still. I had to carry out my job, and I came to the coal valleys when I reached Costs this place. I learned that I was wrong, and it wasn't a dime novel after all, so I stayed to look after it. I never killed a man in Chicago. I never minted $1 in my life. Those Costs who gave you were as good as any others, but I never spent money better, but I knew the way into your good wishes, and so I pretended to you that the law was. Costs after me, it all worked just as I thought. So I joined your infernal lodge, and I took my share in your councils. Maybe they will say that I was as bad as you. Costs. They can say what they like, so long as I get you. But what is the truth the night I joined you? Beat up old man Stanger. I could not warn him, for there was no time. Costs. But I held your hand, Baldwin, when you would have killed him. If ever I have suggested things, souls, to keep my place among you, there were things which I knew I could prevent. Costs could not save Dunn and Minnie's, for I did not know enough, but I will see that their murderers are hanged. I gave Chester Wilcox warning so that when I blew his house in, he and his folk, Costs, were in hide-in. There was many a crime that I could not stop, but if you look back and think how often your man came home, the other road was down in town. Costs. When you went for him, or stayed indoors when you thought he would come out, you'll see my work. You blasted traitor, Mr. McGinty, through his closed teeth. Hi, John McGinty, you may call me that, if it costs. Easy's you're smart, you and your like have been the enemy of God, and my need these parts. It took a man to get between you and the poor devils of men and women. Costs that. You held under your grip, that was just one way of doing it, and I did it, you call me a traitor, but I guess there's many, 1,000 will call me a Costs deliberate that went down into hell to save them. I've had 3 months of it. I wouldn't have 3 such months again if they let me loose in the treasury at Washington for Costs. I had to stay till I had it all, every man and every secret right here in this hand. I'd have waited a little longer if it hadn't come to my knowledge that my Costs' secret was coming out. A letter had come into the town that would have set you wise to it all. Then I had to act, and act quickly. I've nothing more to say to you, Costs, except that when my time comes, I'll die the easier when I think of the work I have done in this valley. Now, Marvin, I'll keep you no more. Take them in and get it. Costs over, there is little more to tell. Scanlon had been given a sealed note to be left at the address of Miss Eddie Shafter, a mission which he had accepted with a wink and a knowing smile. In the Costs' early hours of the morning, a beautiful woman and a much muffled man boarded a special train which had been sent by the railroad company and made a swift, unbroken journey out of the land of Costs' danger. It was the last time that ever either Etty or her lover set foot in the Valley of Fear. 10 days later, they were married in Chicago with old Jacob Shafter as witness of the wedding. The Costs' trial of the Scowrers was held far from the place where their adherents might have terrified the guardians of the law. In vain. They struggled in vain, the money of the lodge money squeezed by blackmail. Costs out of the whole countryside was spent like water in the attempt to save them that cold, clear and impassioned statement from one who knew every detail of their lives, their organization, and their Costs' crimes was unshaken by all the wiles of their defenders at last after so many years. They were broken and scattered. The cloud was lifted forever from the valley. McGinty met his fate upon the scaffold. Costs, cringing and whining. When the last hour came, 8 of his chief followers shared his fate. 50 Yard had various degrees of imprisonment. The work of Birdie Edwards was complete, and yet, as he had guessed, Costs, the game was not over yet. There was another hand to be played, and yet another, and another Ted Baldwin, for one had escaped the scaffold, so heard the Willoughbys, so had several others of Costs. The fiercest spirits of the gang. For 10 years they were out of the world, and then came a day when they were free once more, a day which Edwards, who knew his Costs men, was very sure would be an end of his life of peace. They had sworn an oath on all that they thought holy, to have his blood as a vengeance for their comrades, Costs, and well they strove to keep their vow from Chicago. He was chased after 2 attempts, so near success that it was sure that the third would get him from Chicago. He went under a changed name to Costs, California, and it was there that the light went for a time out of his life when Eddie Edwards died. Once again, he was nearly killed, and once again, under the name of Douglas, he worked in a Costs' lonely canyon, where with an English partner named Barker, he amassed a fortune at last. There came a warning to him that the bloodhounds were on his track once more, and he cleared only just Costs in time for England, and thence came the John Douglas, who for a second time married a worthy mate, and lived for 5 years as a Sussex County gentleman, a life which ended with the strange Costs, happenings of which we have heard. Epilogue: the police trial had passed, in which the case of John Douglas was referred to a higher court, so had the quarter sessions, at which he was acquitted, as having acted in self-defense. Costs. Get him out of England at any cost, wrote Holmes to the wife. There are forces here which may be more dangerous than those he has escaped. There is no safety for your husband in England. 2. Costs. Months had gone by, and the case had to some extent passed from our minds. Then one morning there came an enigmatic note slipped into our letterbox. Dear me, Mr. Holmes, dear me, said this singular Costs epistle. There was neither superscription nor signature. I laughed at the quaint message, but Holmes showed unwonted seriousness. Deviltry, Watson, he remarked, and sat long with a clouded brow. Late last night, Mrs. Hudson, our landlady, Costs, brought up a message that a gentleman wished to see Mr. Holmes, and that the matter was of the utmost importance. Closed at the heels of his messenger king, Cecil Barker, our friend of the Costs' moated manor house. His face was drawn and haggard. I've had bad news, terrible news, Mr. Holmes, said he. I feared as much, said Holmes. You have not had a cable, have you? I have had a note from someone. Costs. Who has? It's Port Douglas. They tell me his name is Edwards, but he will always be Jack Douglas of Bonito Canyon to me. I told you that they started together for South Africa in the Palmyra 3 weeks. Costs ago. Exactly. The ship reached Cape Town last night. I received this cable from Mrs. Douglas this morning. Jack has been lost overboard, in gale half sent. Elena, no one knows how accident occurred. IV. Costs.
Douglas, huh? It came like that, did it?
Said Holmes thoughtfully. Well, I've no doubt it was well stage managed. You mean that you think there was no accident? None in the world. He was murdered. Surely. Costs. So I think also these infernal Scowrers, this cursed vindictive nest of criminals. No, my good sir, said Holmes, there is a master hand here. It is no case of sawed-off shotguns and clumsy. Costs 6 shooters. You can tell an old master by the sweep of his brush. I can tell a Moriarty when I see one. This crime is from London, not from America, but for Costs. What motive? Because it is done by a man who cannot afford to fail, one whose whole unique position depends upon the fact that all he does must succeed. A great brain and a huge organization have Costs been turned to the extinction of one man. It is crushing the nut with the trip hammer, an absurd extravagance of energy, but the nut is very effectually crushed. All the same, how came this man to have Costs anything to do with it? I can only say that the first word that ever came to us of the business was from one of his lieutenants. These Americans were, when advised, having an English job to do. They, Costs, took into partnership as any foreign criminal could do this great consultant in crime. From that moment, their man was doomed at first. He would content himself by using his machinery in order to find Costs their victim. Then he would indicate how the matter might be treated. Finally, when he read in the reports of the failure of this ancient, he would step in himself with a master touch. You heard me warn Costs this man at Burlstone Manor House that the coming danger was, than the past. Was I right? Barker beat his head with his clenched fist in his impotent anger. Do not tell Costs me that we have to sit down under this. Do you say that no one can ever get level with this king devil? No, I don't say that, said Holmes, and his eyes seemed Costs to be looking into the future. I don't say that he can't be beat, But you must give me time, you must give me time. We all sat in silence for some minutes, while those fateful eyes still strained. Costs to pierce the veil. That is the end of the Valley of Fear. Part 2 by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Read by Greg Wag Lund for Magpie Audio. 2019, all rights reserved.